supposed to start at 8:30. So I'll beg that we start because the content that we have to cover is quite huge, and we don't want to delay. Scholar, you can hear me? Scholar is not able to unmute from probably because of the gadget, but I've put her on the panelist, but that's okay. That's a confirmation. That's okay. So we'll proceed. I can see we are already the four of us. And once again, just good morning. And it's my hope and prayer that you've had a very restful night and you feel energized to start your weekend, and you're starting it from a learning mode. For those professionals who actually sacrifice their most precious weekend so that they can learn, it is a good dedication and it's a good commitment, and it's an investment that will pay. So don't get tired of this. So for the sake of the people that we have not interacted before, my name is Rhoda Wairioko. I'm a HR practitioner, a HR consultant, and also a trainer with ACHRP. I know our founder is in, Mr. Dance Peters, and I think he's also held up. So we will just begin with the training, so feel welcome. And I'll give us just 5 minutes so that we can just introduce yourselves. Just tell us your name, what you're doing with yourself, and maybe what is your expectation on this topic that we are going to cover, which is on crisis management. Anyone who is able to unmute, you could just say hi, tell us your name and the background you're coming from, and what you expect to carry away by the end of this session.
Morning, my name is Sarah Josiah. I work with an NGO in the Human Resource Department. And basically, I think just what it says, crisis management, learning how to deal with crisis, how to respond, what to put in place in order to respond better.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, for that good introduction.
Good morning, this is Scholar. Now I'm able to unmute.
Thank you, Scholar, and welcome.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I'm also in the NGO sector, in the Human Resources Department. I sense that there are very many levels of crisis. Sometimes things look like crisis at personal level, at the organizational level, but also the crisis we respond to external to our organization. So I just want to see the different crises and whether there is a standard way or a variety of ways to apply crisis management in those scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you very much and feel welcome. Bernice, are you able to unmute?
Yes, good morning. My name is Bernice Getata. I have a HR background spanning 20 years, currently out of work. So this is part of my knowledge learning journey. And yeah, I'd like to learn more about crisis management and how to handle it in the workplace and also on a personal level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And those are the ones that we have. The others will join us. We are expecting 17 more, but because of respecting time, as professionals, we should be able to manage our time properly. I would beg that we start, then they'll join us in the course of the program. So let me request either Bunny, Sarah, or Scholar, maybe to start us off with a word of prayer.
Let's pray. Our dear loving Father, we are grateful because of this day that you created. Thank you for helping us to be alive and awake and ready for this training this morning, oh God. I pray that, Lord, you may bring our hearts and minds into the course, not just to hear, but also to be able to translate what we learn into action, oh God. We pray for Rhoda, our facilitator, that you will enable her to impart the training on us in an effective way, oh God. And we also pray that we will be present and that you will bring others that are not yet here, oh God, that you will quicken them, that we can learn together and benefit to the full extent. We pray that your presence will be with us through and through this day. In Jesus' name we pray and give thanks. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Scholar, for that powerful prayer. It's always good to start your day with a prayer so that God can guide our steps. So you'll allow me to upload the program that you're going to cover. It is quite huge, and we hope we'll be able to cover all that in the 3-4 hours we have. So this training for crisis management, we are going to cover what is crisis. We want to understand what is a crisis and how does a crisis come about. Then we'll also look at the evolution of the crisis. We look at some of the design, testing, and also implementation of maybe the crisis management plans. We'll look at a framework for crisis management. We will look at crisis management landscape, that's both internally and also we look externally. And also we look at cases of organization crisis and how they come depending with the stage and the composition of an organization. We're going to look at how we can do crisis management through strategic planning and also the assessing of the risks and also the vulnerability. We look at forming crisis management team in an organization, and also maybe the plan, which will also be able to reflect, as many of you have expected, maybe on a personal level. Then we'll also look at organization strategy and also the crises, taking action when a disaster occurs. So if a crisis or a crisis event occur, then how do we take action? We look at the crisis communication, then also the importance of organization learning in terms of what has happened from a crisis and how to pick. And then we may look at an exercise if time allows. If time does not allow, probably we'll carry it as a homework. So our session was supposed to start from 8:30 to 12:30, and we will try to cover as much as we can. I can see it's already 9. So without much ado, I would allow me to upload the presentation so that we can also follow. And as I do that, maybe just to congratulate those of people who are sacrificing their weekend. I've had someone saying they're out of job and they are now in the learning and trying to see what to do. This is one of the crisis management strategies that she has taken, that when she's on the waiting, she's able to upskill herself, and maybe by the time she rebounds back, she'll be much better than she left. That's very commendable, and keep it up. You can see my presentation? Are you able to see from your end?
Yes.
Yes.
Good. So we'll start. Maybe just to hear from you, what is a crisis management, or what is a crisis in your own understanding? What is a crisis? And how does it come about? What are some of the things that trigger a crisis, or maybe escalate a crisis? Let me hear just random answers. What is a crisis? Anyone? Janet and Wanja, welcome. I've sent an invitation so that you join this other side of the panel so that you're able to unmute and contribute. Welcome on board. We've just started.
I would say it could be a time of difficulty, maybe one would be facing.
A time of difficulty that someone may be facing. Any other trial? or is just a crisis? I'm waiting for a second answer so that we can move.
Sometimes it could be an unfolding of unknown events.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very correct. Unfolding of an unknown or unexpected event, that something just happened when you least expect it. And we will see, like, for many times for crisis, it will hit when we least expect, probably when you are least expected or prepared. I'll give an example, like the organization crisis that occur, or even in our personal lives. It comes when you least expect it. You are not prepared. Of course, we all have one way of preparing for a crisis, but it will hit on a weekend, on a public holiday, when you are least prepared in terms of financial, like when you're losing a job. So that's what we can say. It's an unexpected crisis that comes when you least expect, or probably it is beyond your control, or you could not have perceived it. So we are saying a good crisis management can be different. What determines the impact of the crisis, it is how prepared we are or how unprepared we are. So we are saying good crisis management can make the difference between maybe a hero or a villain, how you'll be seen to be a coward, you have failed, or you become a hero, because something can happen to you, but then how you respond to it makes the entire difference. Then we are saying every organization from time experience, they experience challenging behaviors, occurrences, that may be very dangerous, or maybe they are very impactful in terms of the performance of the organization. So we will look at all those things, and we are going to see how we can deal with these issues called crisis. So we'll begin our presentation. That is just the course coverage, as I've explained. And in essence, there are three types of crises. Let's look at them. So there are those that happens out of an accident. For example, we've had about the plane crashes. Maybe the Swiss Air is an example. KQ, we had an example. And we can look at the things that happened during that crisis. How did the organizations like the KQ, how did they handle that? How did the Swiss Air handle the crisis they had? Then we also have issues like for manufacturing industries, the chemical spillages maybe on the floor that can be able to maybe set a factory on fire, or people can fall and they're injured. So some can cause injuries or also fatalities. Then we could also have product defects that happens out of an accident, or maybe something, maybe a mechanical breakdown or such. That is the first kind of, or maybe the first type of a crisis that we experience in our organizations. It could also be at a personal level when you have maybe an accident at a personal level, and or maybe you break your leg. Those are crises. The other category we have, there are those types of crises that are manufactured. What we mean by manufactured crisis is these are crises that are actually originated by maybe other people or other organizations acting, or also actions, or also omissions. It could be caused by someone else. We've had crises where even someone's losing a job, it is engineered from other people, maybe who feel they are your rivals, they are your competitors, they are not happy about how you are progressing, or probably they just don't like your face. Or it could also be out of, we have seen crises in organization which have been engineered by maybe the civil society movements, where people go, they go to the streets, they take placards, and they actually make the organization deep. And we look at the examples of maybe the controversy of the Shell and the green space. What happened? Shell had a facility, a facility in the ocean that they wanted now to do away with and also dispose. However, the green space or the environment now started demonstrating and said, no, it is going to harm our environment. And they started a movement and a far cry. And they could say, of course, they wanted to have another use for this facility because it had done its its tenor. So they said maybe probably we could dispose this by maybe sinking it into the ocean and using those facilities for something else. So the environment could say, yes, it's a good thing, but then what is the impact of our environment? So a lot of noise came about and that became now impossible. So those are what we call manufactured crises. Then the third category of the crises that we're going to look at, those crises which escalate from an accident or maybe from a simple issue. They are those issues that we normally see warning signs, they gradually build up, and eventually, if we are not managed well, they blow out into a big crisis. So we'll also look at such examples. Then maybe we can learn from this case study. We'll start by learning from a case study so that we can understand how this is done. So this is an example of an accident, a plane accident that happened for the crisis arrest from a major accident that are often very tragic. And the easiest way to deal with the Swiss Air crisis, we can look at how they dealt with it. So this is an accident that happened in the 1998. And probably any of you who've heard about this accident and what maybe how the Swiss Air took it up. It is a plane accident that actually had fatalities of 229 people, everybody who was on board and who perished. There are many theories that are would try to actually explain what happened. One of them that it was a technical wiring issue that actually caused fire to inflammable parts or components of the plane. However, even after so much investigation, we cannot pinpoint or say there was a very conclusive cause of that fire. But what did the Swiss Air do? Anybody who've heard about that case, the Swiss Air accident of the 1998? Anybody who have interacted with that case or heard? I'm sure some of us, we were still, maybe we had started working, we were in universities. What happened? Anyone? Maybe just to tell you what happened. When this accident happened, the organization, the Swiss Air, was not defensive because they knew there were many victims of this accident. So what they did, they actually took part, went to the media, held press conferences, and actually just comforted the people who had lost, the families of the people who had lost their life. They actually went ahead and said, yes, this accident happened. They are still investigating. And instead of being defensive or trying to pass the blame to various people, what they did a compensation, a very generous compensation to the families of the people who lost their life. And for every person who had lost their life, they gave a compensation of about $20,000. Actually, it was exactly $20,000 to every family. So and they processed the payment very fast. So because, and what they concentrated on was actually dealing with the bereaved, giving them care, telling them pole, visiting them, holding regular conference meetings. So by the end of that, they were able to manage such crises very well, and they were able to actually pick up from there and move on. So this is a classical model of how to handle a crisis well. And I think the same thing also happened about the KQ. Remember when we had a KQ accident, how Naikuni could come to the press conferences, the news, and tell us what was happening, getting in touch with the family, setting up desk. So those are some of the cases that we can learn from in terms of the crisis management. So we'll continue to see other stories or maybe other incidences that have happened either locally and also internationally. So let's look at this case for the shell versus the green space case. And what we see in this case that the green group or the NGOs, the non-governmental institutions that were there, for most part, unelected, and therefore they are unaccountable. So they can get very chaotic because they are there as activists or maybe just to put people into action or to make them accountable. But you can see we don't have a proper mechanism of regulating what they can say. And also coupled with the freedom of information and also freedom of speech, it becomes very, very difficult maybe for organizations who are being faced by this. So we could see in this term of the manufactured, the huge noise and the issues ensuing crisis against the project that the Brent Spar, that was the name of the project for the Shell, and genetically modified organisms are orchestrated and managed by just a few people, maybe in the civil society or maybe the NGO. We are not condemning the people in the NGO, but we can see the way they can actually escalate or trigger a crisis to be something big. Certainly, they were successful in changing the public opinion because they actually operate through activism on the issues that were being raised. And this is not a fault on the system. It was not a fault on the company, and they cannot run away from this. Certainly, media also plays a very big role in terms of the coverage and what they actually cover. So in managing a crisis, well, we always advocate where if there is media involved, don't deny them the information, give them the truth, give them the correct information, and ensure you're the one who is proactive and to go to the media and invite them for press conferences so that if you, they're able to report accurately and maybe what is coming from an organization. If actually you don't do this, the media has a way of getting this information and you don't know who they'll get that information from. So probably they'll even get it from your competitors. And you can imagine this, it can be reported very negatively. So let's look at what we call the industrial crisis. What is an industrial crisis and how does it occur? An industrial crisis is like an occupation or a crisis that arises from organization in the course of carrying out their duties. And mostly the conflict comes when the organization concentrate on the productivity and they want to maximize on the profit and they want to grow and expand the business. Then there is also the changing profile of the societies or the people who are actually who are actually in our communities. So when there is a variant or a difference between what the society or the community expect and what the organization is doing in terms of the strategic goals and the objective, and also how they are reaching to the community, we can have a crisis of the two. When there is a clash of the two, then a crisis might come. People might start demonstrating because probably the organization, in the way they are disposing their material, it is affecting the health of the people in the community. And this is one of the major reasons why organizations come up with the corporate social responsibility and also care for the environment. And this is where now our civil societies and also the NGO comes in handy to ensure that this gap is actually reduced and they are able to coexist and work in harmony. I know we have had cases of such industrial crises in our country, and also the changing demographics actually also affect this because there is more information, people are more aware of their rights, and they're likely to raise issues when they see the organizations are not acting as per their expectation. Even internally, when especially in organizations where we have the union, we are likely to have industrial crises in terms of the goals of the organization and the workers also trying to actually fight for fair treatment, fair remuneration, representation, and issues like the strike will become issues like the industrial crisis. So some of the characteristics of the industrial crisis we are saying industrial crises have a number of key defining characteristics that we are going to look at. So triggering event, what is triggering this crisis? So every time we come to a crisis, whether at personal level or an organization level, we should be able to look back candidly and clearly and say, what could have triggered this event? I know a lot of people have been affected by job losses because of the pandemic. This was unexpected. It was unpredictable. We didn't see it coming. So even organizations have been hit negatively in terms of the bottom lines, the profitability, and they're struggling to survive. So we've seen people losing their job through redundancy, through retrenchment, because the organization probably are struggling to survive. And what we look back and say, I know at a personal level, we are always told to have an emergency fund. It is something that we have learned for over the years. But maybe because of the needs and the challenges we have, the money we get, it's never enough to take care of the school fees of our children and our personal issues that we look. But we always look at it like, I'll build, I'll keep on building. Then a pandemic hits. Then we find ourselves on the receiving side. Yeah, you may have that emergency fund, but what do you do with it? Are you able to pick that money and start a business? Are you able to sustain with all the, maybe the liabilities you have to take you for 6 months? It is something that is really awakening and reckoning that what are the triggering effects when we come at a risk management plan? What are some of the things that we do and say, this can happen? But most of the time we find these things don't happen. But when you least expect and we are unprepared, it happens. So what is the best way? One of the things you can do is to benchmark with the other organization. When this crisis hit, what did we do? If it's on a personal level, I can tell you one of the things that would happen, someone probably has gone through it before and they've been able to bounce back maybe even better than they were. How did they handle it? How did they go? What are some of the things that you can do so that you can be able to prepare for the future that such does not occur? And if it was occur, because if it were to occur because it's beyond your control, how would you handle it differently? Then responses to crisis is what we are saying. How do we respond to a crisis? Because they are sure they will happen. Whether you'll just hit your toe as you're passing by a table, you'll just drop a grass, a crisis will happen. And that is part of life. So how do we respond in future if this was to? Do we become reactive? Do we become, of course, after it has happened, the strategies you take are reactive because you are responding to what has happened. But proactively, what is it that we could do differently? Then the other characteristics of industrial crisis is large-scale damage to human life and also the environment. We are looking at crises like a fire outbreak, an act of terrorism. So when that happens, there's a possibility of large-scale damage to the human life and also the environment and also probably the building. Crisis resolution and crisis extension. It's how we resolve that crisis so that we don't allow it to escalate to a higher and maybe more damaging level. Large economic cost. It, of course, a crisis costs everybody. It costs in terms of the money, the human lives, maybe the injuries, the emotional drain, wasted manpower, low productivity, and also the bottom line. Then large social costs. I've talked about that. Then it involves multiple stakeholders. Every crisis, it may happen to one person, to one organization, but it has a ripple effect to multiple stakeholders. Even at our homes, it will affect our families. It will affect maybe the kind of life that we live. Then we are going to look at preventing things from going wrong. This is not applicable in every situation. There are those things that are within our control. The things that we can, we will look at the things that maybe we have a strategic control, and there are those things so that we can come up with maybe some plans or mitigation in case they happen. But there are those ones that are fully beyond us. So in terms of preventing things from going wrong, we look at some few things. One is to establish the purpose and context of risk management plan. Why do we want to have, we always say, even in terms of financial career or personal development, that we come up with our individual strategic plan. I know there are people who have individual strategic plan. You look at your life and say, of course, we don't know whether we will reach there, but we always hope that we live to 100. So you'll see someone coming with, we make the annual resolution. You can make a 5-year plan, 10-year plan to see, this is how I want to accumulate my wealth. This is how I want to develop myself. This is also how I want to grow myself. How many of us are able to prepare for crisis or any risks? One thing we should know, if you are human, an accident can occur. And that is why we normally see people going for personal insurance, we're insuring our vehicles, and probably maybe even starting an education fund for our children, because we are prone to these things happen. So have we also come up over and above the strategic plan? Yes, this is what I want to achieve, but there are risks to it. in case something occurs that is unexpected, we are unprepared for, are there mitigating measures that we can do? That if this does not work, then I can bounce back to do this. So what other things can you do when maybe what you are expecting to do, it is not working? Then we also are supposed to assign responsibility for risk management planning by establishing what we'll call the risk management committees and the teams, which we'll look at. We should acknowledge, identify your organizational risk or your personal risk. We should evaluate and prioritize risk. Which risk, in case it was to occur, would have a big impact, and which risks are very highly likely to occur. Then determine how your organization will manage its risks, and then we'll also look at how to implement the risk management plan that have been put in place. So let's look at broadly the evolution of our crisis, how it has evolved over time. And in terms of the evolution, we need to look at maybe the vulnerability of an organization, of the industry that we are operating in. If an organization is existing in a particular industry or an environment, one of the first things to do, it is actually to scan the environment and look at the vulnerability of that organization and the probability of a risk occurring. Then the other thing we should do, when we actually identify the strengths of the organization and the weaknesses, we also look at the threats and the threats and also the opportunity that are available from outside. So risk assessment is one of the critical exercise in an organization that should be given a lot of weight, and we should also invest a lot. I know many organizations are doing very poorly in terms of the risk management. Maybe at this time of the pandemic is when most of the organizations are running to come up with a BCP. Maybe from the people we have, how many people have, maybe by a show of hand, have BCP, which is working in their workplace? A BCP that is working, that is properly funded, that was there before even Corona. Let me see, by show of hands. A working BCP that is actually functional. Manis, do you have one in your workplace that you are aware of? Sarah, Scholar Wanja, a business continuity plan that is working? Or does just our risk department or internal department develop a risk management framework, trained, we keep on updating, but do we implement it in terms of even having the mock drives? How many? The silence means none. Scholar, do you have one?
Yes, we do. We do have the risk and compliance department that helps us to keep updating our risk register. Yeah, so every quarter we keep reviewing and updating.
Do you normally do the mock drives?
Okay, we did not always. We actually did one. Okay, they're different. It depends. Like, for example, the fire incidences, those ones we do the drills, although we haven't done in the last 1 year because hardly do we work in the office. And so there are different ways of working now with the pandemic. But previously we had the fire drills and crisis. Just when we knew Corona or the pandemic might just hit the country, we did a drill for COVID. We did a different type of BCP, but I don't see the separate BCP working. The one that we did, working from the risk matrix, the risk register that we keep updating. So I think we consolidated our risk management into the risk register. Yeah.
So how many organizations could, I'm sure we had natural risks, and one of them, how many had thought about a pandemic that could bring us to this level? We always think of earthquake, we will lose the building, we need to evacuate our staff. How many had thought that a pandemic, of course, we've had various epidemics like the cholera, we have had the Ebola, but how many had ever thought that the country could be brought to its knees or the economy to this level? Or we kept on thinking maybe the technology fails. How many had foreseen and were prepared for this, despite having very beautiful BCPs? None of us had foreseen that. So this is just a confirmation that for crisis to occur, for risk, some are unpredictable. Of course, we have thought about it because we normally read in books and we see a pandemic is a crisis, or we are vulnerable to that. But we have never thought about to that level that we'll be able to prepare. So we were all caught unaware until, of course, we had it in the other countries, and we probably thought it will not come to Africa, it will not come to Kenya. But then when the reality hit, and when now the government started giving directives, I'm sure majority of us were even picking issues from the Ministry of Health directives and the regulations that were being pronounced. So this one is something that caught us off guard. Businesses have suffered, and it is a learning lesson. And I think for those who didn't have, they are able to do that. Again, I've seen institutions where they have the risk management policy, but they don't come up with a plan. And then when we come up with a plan, do we ensure that the people we are putting in the committee or the risk management teams actually understand what they're expected to do, their role? Do they have any procedures that if it hits today, they're able to do that and that? And what is the role of every department and any member who is in that committee? So we will look at those things and how they occur. So predicting a crisis. How do we predict a crisis in our organizations? And we are saying, as companies grow, their growth makes them even more vulnerable to various crises. I hope you all agree with this. And I also look at it from even from personal perspectives. Let's talk, because we are in HR. So the higher you go in a career ladder, the more the risks that you experience. The higher you grow, the higher the exposures and the risk. If you grow to a top management, the higher the exposure and the impact of risk or of you being affected by the corporate culture, the corporate politics. We have seen people where senior management, top management has just been rendered redundant. Political osters from the office. All these are things that then you are under more scrutiny than any other person who is in the shop floor or any other officer in the organization. So you become a target for criticism, for actually being looked at more closely than before. So that is the same way organizations actually deal with crisis, and they also escalate as you start. So when you're having a small startup, probably the issues you're struggling with is finances, professional knowledge. You've not been able to hire people who have the experts. Probably you cannot even afford them. And the issues you're struggling with, the issue of the office, can you afford rent? But when you grow to the level of Safaricom, anything that you do like this, it is actually very scrutinized by the public and also the other stakeholders. Even the community, where people will feel this organization is growing very fast, but we don't feel it in terms of our pocket in the community. You can see the reaction of the people who, when the Safaricom actually declare their financial statement, and you can see the kind of money they are making in the community. We say they are not giving enough to the community, not just giving because they have foundations. People feel they are not giving enough. Again, agencies like the government agencies like KRA, now they start looking, and the regulators, they start looking at them more closely to see, was this genuine income? The profits they are posting, did they pay all the taxes? Did they comply? And now it becomes an issue of fault finding. Then crises are not often very difficult to, they are most often very difficult to predict, as we have said. You cannot predict enough, you cannot be prepared well enough. It is a very difficult endeavor. Then we are saying, we have seen also the evolution in our workplaces and organization, where before we used to have generalist kind of workers and also the management, where you could find an office. You can understand where we came as HR, where we had personnel officers and personnel managers who could do everything from mailing, secretarial work, caring for. It was more personnel and office management that anybody could have become a personnel manager. Whether you're a secretary and whether you're an office administrator, it was a role of generalist. But as we progress, we have continued to see specialization in our careers, where now managers or people in the office, they're highly specialized in what? Like a finance person will concentrate on finance, and what they know is account numbers and finance. So that also has brought about a challenge, because when a crisis occurs, then people work in departmental silos and they just know what they're supposed to know. If you're HR, you're just a HR. Are you able to learn what the business is doing? Are you able to take up leadership positions that are nothing to do with HR? So that when you put in this committee, now you put your HR hat aside, and then you are able to do this risk management. And that is why risk management is very critical for, or crisis management for everybody in the organization, not just for HR. Probably you are HR because, and you have attended this training because it is part of your role to be member of that committee. And at times when you're picking the members of the committee, we just pick them from their role. You imagine because you are in HR, you are a better fit. But have we looked at the competencies, the personality, and other things that brings about the crisis management? We have seen people in HR who cannot work under pressure, that the sight of something, a crisis or an emergency, they are emotionally drained, they can faint, they can cry. So you can imagine putting someone like that in a crisis management team. So those are some of the things that have actually also influenced the predictability of the crisis, and also how we deal with. So is it better when people were trained as generalists, that they could do anything? They could reinvent themselves and improve themselves in any activities of the organization? Or are we better off working as pure specialists? HR don't want to hear anything to do with finance. They don't want to hear anything to do with manufacturing or the operation. Our work is just to manage people and to implement the HR policies. So that is one of the things that we need to look at. Let's look at some of the checklists that is based on that kind of a background of specialist versus the generalist. So some of the checklists that we should look in our organization is, are all our managers aware, and do they have powers and influence over the following that we've put on the checklist? First one, are they aware of the politics and the political environment in which they operate? Are we aware? As HR, we said we are HR practitioners, most of us. Are you aware of the politics and the political environment of where you're operating, whether as an industry, a person at a personal level in your organization? Are you aware of the organization politics and the environment? Are you aware of the people who have a say or who have a shot, whose opinion will carry weight, not just structurally, that the CEO or the MD is the one who has the say, or your top management? We have seen in our organization where people in maybe the bottom levels, the messengers and the cleaners, at times they have a lot of political power and political influence. The unions, these are people who can easily remove you as a top manager from the office, including the CEO, and your contract is not renewed. Are you aware as a HR? Yes, you are aware, but what is your political intelligence or the competencies? We agree what we train and how things are on the ground, they're different. I'm sure in most of our organization, we experience that. Our managers are aware about media management, including you. How do we handle the media? How are we supposed to, do we have policies? Do we have the professionalism? Can we influence the media or the bloggers in a way that they report positively about an organization? The values of company reputation, how much do we know about preserving the company's reputation? And what should we do? Just as an ordinary specialist, I'm looking like an accountant, the CFO, are they aware of that? That when these numbers look like this, this is what we are likely to do. Are we aware about stakeholders management? The stakeholders is just not narrow what is within your department. Probably in HR, you think the stakeholders maybe are the statutory organization like NSSF, NITA, NHIF, maybe the medical insurance that you have, but the bigger stakeholders of the organization. Who are your customers? Who are you representing? Who are the people who are being served and who rely on your organization? How many of our managers are aware of that? How many are aware of the corporate social responsibilities? CSR, or is a marketing department, a communication department, it is a HR department activity. How many actually think about it in a very organizational level and they know the values and have information about CSR? How many in our organizations or managers have a formal data collection and feedback mechanism so that they be able to identify problematic areas that can occur in an organization? How many of us have clear procedures for analyzing and auditing the data and the information we are picking from the field? And are there early warning signs that we see in our organization or our personal life, but we ignore? Probably you could be feeling you have a headache, you have a pain in the chest, you don't know what is this happening, but we keep on saying, it will go away. But you're afraid to go to the hospital so that maybe they can have an early diagnosis. This is what is happening to a lot of maybe cases of cancer. You have this pain, you have this, but you keep on downplaying it. I don't know what happened. And we are all afraid, what if we go and we are told this, but you can maybe attest with me that if there is early detection, then maybe also the impact of the damage is actually managed or lessened. So we are able to manage this. So these are some of the checklists that when you're looking at our organizations, at our individual level and our managers who are specialists or the generalists, we need to have that checklist so that we can put ourselves in the know of what we do. So we are going to look at some of the guidelines that we can use for crisis prediction. And we have put them into 6. I think there are large 6 guidelines. One is what we're calling simple in concept that we can look at. Scientifically complex. We'll have the slogan ability. We'll also have the related to issues. One issue is related to the other. Open to speculation, and we'll also have the data rich. So when you look at simple in concept, these are simple concepts that we say a crisis is in black and white. It is either there, it's either there or not there. A crisis should be known. It is predictable. That is what it argues. When you come to scientifically complex, it is related to data rich, where we say scientists will always try to dig into something, and they'll always have different opinion that when an occurrence occurs, they say the factors that are behind that occurrence cannot be comprehended by an ordinary person. So it will need a lot of theories, a lot of interpretation, a lot of analysis by specialists to come up with a real prediction or a cause, so that it is not possible to predict a crisis from an ordinary person. The slogan ability. Slogan ability is where we try to manage the crisis by using very short words like what we call a slogan, a motto. And this can be expressed in a pictorial format or images, like where we see the logos of the company, and probably the slogan would be what they are there for. We'll look at some of the examples that we have. Related to issue. It is when a crisis, it is not standing on its own. It is actually related to something else. We've looked at how crisis can be manufactured, or it's impacted by something else. Or when you try to sweep issues under the carpet, then they escalate to be a big crisis. Open to speculation is those things that we just open. They're open, they can happen, they cannot happen. Then data rich, we will look at this concept where we are already in the information age. In this environment, we are data rich. But as we try to evaluate that data, it becomes more complex and even more complicated. That we say, the more knowledge you learn, the more you keep on discovering, the more complicated it advances. So let's look at each of them. So simple in concept, you're saying the crisis must be simple and capable of being defined as either black or white. This allows sides to be taken, particularly by the media. The case we looked at, the Brent Spa, the issue of sea dumping is a bad. So that's clear. It's a clear tick. The recycling of the structure was also a good idea because it makes economic sense. Instead for it to just be there, probably it can be used to do another cause. Then nuclear power. We all understand how nuclear power came about. There was like, it was almost a zero cost to the electricity. The households would be made cheaper. That's when we have the green economy and the nuclear power. But however, the issue that maybe the environmentalists have brought about is, yes, we have the nuclear power. Now it is being used for warfare from against states. And what will be the disposal? Yes, once we manufacture that nuclear power, there was no proper way of disposing this waste because it has to be disposed in an environment, and it's likely to have an impact and an environmental hazard in terms of the societies and the communication. So that's a very simple concept where you look at things and say, this is good, this is bad, this was supposed to happen, just in simple concept. Scientifically complex. We are saying the science surrounding the crisis must be extremely complex and impenetrable to ordinary person. This is essential, as otherwise people would be able to make reasoned decisions on what is right and what is wrong. So the science surrounding the disposal of that case, the Brent Spa, was very complex. You could not predict. You see the way the environmentalists or the green space are looking at it, it's either good or bad. But when you come to the scientific complex way of management, it will ask valid questions and very scientific questions like, how many pollutants are in that tank that was holding oil in the sea? How many of those chemicals are in that tank? And would the structure, if it was sunk to the ocean, become a haven of maybe the sea creatures that they will, I don't know if some of us were able to watch one of the ferries being sunk. Was it in Mombasa? They sank a ferry. And if you look at that, then it was to become a safe haven, apart from the oil, because it was all drained, for the fish and the creatures are there. They make a home for it. So these are some of the things the scientists will ask. Or will there be damage to the ecology in terms of the ocean floor? So you can imagine how it is becoming scientifically complex. And you can imagine now that organization, now the Shell, being subjected by the scientists they have hired as consultants, and the green space, who are environment activists. So actually that project didn't even kick, beside being approved by the government in their parliament. So the data rich, I think it's what we talked about, that we normally keep on saying a lot, disclosure, freedom of information sharing. And we've come up with statutes and registrations that any organization should be able to disclose their financials, their performance. There are so much demands for transparency and disclosure of the information. But this has a flip side. We have seen increasingly in our organization, there's a lot of or increased leakage of confidential data. There's nothing that is so confidential, because the moment you put your performance and your financials on the website, people will keep on analyzing and finding it. Why is the operation cost like this? Why are they paying staff like this? So you open yourself to a lot of criticism. And with that kind of curiosity, people will go ahead and even maybe approach your employees, approach people who have the confidential information, and without knowing, you end up discussing this confidential information. So this is how the information has shaped. So it becomes, as we also evolve in terms of the technology, information age, then new risks start coming up. We have had many cases of information leakages in terms of in the name of transparency. Then we talked about slogan. These are some of the slogans we have that actually talk about why an organization does what they are doing. They just come up with few words and catchy or abbreviation that will actually justify their existence. And mostly because they are very convincing, it becomes very hard to criticize them. Like the BMW. Everybody knows BMW. You don't have to ask what it means, but they'll give it, it's an ultimate driving machine. Alice, we try harder, and that kind of. So when someone is trying to criticize them, they manage by saying, we really try harder. This is our purpose. This is our essence. This is our existence. And in terms of the nuclear disposals, what are some of the things that we are saying they want to do to actually minimize the risk and the exposure and maybe the public opinion? They will say the reason that we want to dispose this nuclear waste is because maybe probably there are controversy. They'll say out of sight, out of mind, so that we do away with this and we continue with our lives. So we are saying slogans like this are very hard to argue with, generally because they have enough truth in them. Because why do you want to dispose? They want to create more space, they want to do away with, to make them credible. And that they have no smaller prints to qualify them. So they are broadly there in the light, and they are captivating. So large organizations, even though they may be brilliant in marketing, they are not good in responding to this type of attack. If someone attacks that slogan and you are put into task of explaining how hard you're trying, how it is out of sight, out of mind, they are hardly able to respond to that, because nuclear, of course, will dispose it, release it to the air or underground, but then the ripple effect and the long-term effect, how are you going to deal with them? So they find themselves struggling to respond to such questions. Then we'll also look at the law of absolute. What does the law of absolute means? The law of absolute. What does it mean? Anyone? Any volunteer? What it means when you know something or a crisis or an event in absolute term, you are really, you feel empowered and you feel, you know, there is a high level of certainty. This is what I know. However, as you continue to learn more, the law of absolute says the more you know, the less you know. You have maybe gone and researched about a particular project, and you thought you know what it means. That's why you picked the topic. But as you learn and gather more information, then it starts becoming more blurry. Or you don't know even what to take and not what to take. So once we have this law of the absolute, it is like the science advancement that we are having, or the capability of identifying the presence of the most of the levels of this issue. It becomes now more difficult to say with clarity, this is what a crisis was. If we go to a crisis, let's say a fire outbreak, we will know the fire was started by an electrical fault. What comes to your mind? It is an accident. Some wires must have touched each other. But then, as more information comes in, then as you get more information, it even starts becoming, it is a arsonist attack. It was caused by someone was negligent. And those are the things that we see. So scientists thrive in that they want to gather more information, make things complex, analyze each and every component of the crisis. But for the civil society or in the environment, they normally like the absolute things. It is good or bad. It is a yes or no. It is black or and white. Then related to issues, this one I think we had explained. We had said these are the issues that are related to each other. And we say often issues escalate to a crisis when they are not managed properly. Then we could say it could be argued that an issue is not an issue until it becomes a crisis. That is what about the related issues. One thing must have led to the other. Maybe probably we try to deal with it or not to deal with it. So then we have what we call the Murphy law. This one I'll not, because they are just terms. I think we really want to hear the issue things. The Murphy law argues that in planning, all is well until one thing does not happen, all goes wrong. We can plan, we can have very beautiful strategic plan, risk management plan, but we can never prepare enough, because it also argues that what is supposed to go wrong will still go wrong. If something was to happen to you, how much you avoid, it will still happen. And probably when you try so hard to avoid, like when you are working, and there's an error, you feel anxious, you are trying to be so careful, and something will still go wrong if it was to go wrong. And we are saying it's talk about characteristics of a crisis occurring when we least expect. I said maybe during the holidays. We have always done the fire drills, as we've had, I think, from Scholar. We've done those mock, but now we are not able to do them because we are working virtually from home. So what would happen? Because we are still having those offices, if fire broke out, or we have a crisis in there, or there's a terrorist attack, and probably because now we are working home, and maybe the restrictions of movement have been relaxed, there's nothing that stops me that if my home is in Malindi or Mombasa, I can go to the coast and stay there as long as I have internet. Nobody is asking me how close am I to the office. So what if the chair of that committee, or majority of the one is in Kitui, the other one in Mombasa, the other one in Malindi, if an occurrence occur today, like today in the morning, how prepared are we? Again, when maybe issues like fraud, fire, arsonist attack, and terrorism, when they happen, majority of them happens over the weekend, during a public holiday when people have traveled away, and even convening the team and calling the people is very scattered. Even by the time we say this is the fire assembly point, there are no people to assemble. Or we also have the fire extinguishers all over the corridor. There is nobody to even deal with them. So that is what it talks about. It says no one is ever in the right place at the right time. That is how crisis hit. You had not moved to a level of you're close to retirement. Probably some of us have been saying, I want to start consultancy. I want to endeavor in other, the things that you can do within HR. I want to become a trainer, but I'm not yet there. I've not hit 50. I'll do it next year. I'll do it. Others will even register companies, but we don't activate. When we least expect, we always find yourself, we are not at the right place at the right time. And then the impact of that crisis actually becomes very huge. Then it says, when a crisis, it argues that when a crisis occurs, what we're calling the mini-Murphys will always come to the front. What this means, the people probably we have given positions because of organization hierarchy and bureaucracies. We think they are the people who will manage the crisis. But what the mini-Murphy concept talks about, when a crisis occur or an event, new leaders will emerge. When we are studying about leadership, we normally see one of the ways that leaders emerge, they emerge through a crisis. So it has that aspect of reinventing the people and having the regrowth, that the people that you least expect, that messenger you actually least expect, that their work is just to deliver letters and make your tea, maybe the heroes of that event, because they run out of the office and they know maybe the people's or the employees' trend, who is likely to be in the office, who doesn't leave their desk, and they're the people who are running in and out and rescuing people. We can see like what happened in the Garissa University terrorism attack. People from nowhere, we expected to see the governor and who being on the front line, the CEOs, maybe the in charge of that institution, or maybe the head of DCI. But you see the heroes who came out of that event. The people come to forefront because that is what happens. And maybe probably the people you expected, because someone is on a higher position to act, they fail to act. And the people we had a lot of hope for, they also fail at that time. And we say things always get worse before. And indeed, if they get better. Then we continue to maybe I could pause there before we go to the next topic, which is design, testing, and implementation. And I take a few comments, questions, clarifications. Any? Or do we proceed? I know we have a Q&A at the end. Sarah had said that one we already sorted out. Let me see if there are people in the attendance so that I can promote them. Winnie, kindly accept my invitation to the panel so that we can all talk to each other. send the invitations. Any comments, clarifications, or we proceed?
We can proceed.
We can proceed, good. So we are going to look at the design, testing, and implementation of these programs that we have. And the first thing we'll look at, just a minute. The process, in terms of when you look at how do we design, we test, and we implement a program, we are going to look at a three-stage, the three most important elements to any crisis management plan. So the things that we need to look at first is identification of the crisis management team. For any crisis to be managed, it has to be managed by people who are competent. This is at an organization level. You look at the skills of those people, their competencies, their personality, and also that they are working well with each other. I'll take it as also a personal level. We normally have three basic categories of people you are aware of. Those people you consider, like when you're in a personal crisis, who are the people that you'd classify as your personal confidants? Someone that you can be vulnerable with, you can tell them they understand you from a personal level, whether it's in your finances, your career, your spirituality, your health, welfare, in terms of the family, they understand you. These are very few people in your life. You could just be having 1, 2, 3, or 4 people. Maximum probably 3, 5 that you can run to when you are most vulnerable and you are at the rock bottom. In fact, that's when you know who are your friends. How can they assist you, or how do you come through for them when they are in this crisis? And how can they help you start all over again? Whether it's a house that has burned down, maybe it's a burglary, it's an issue of losing a job, it's an issue of sickness when you are at your worst, that you don't even want to tell people what you're suffering from. What are these fast to go people that you have in life? Do we have such support system? It could be from the family or outside of the family. The people that you have learned or you have come together along your career, or you are in the same school, but you're friends for life, that you can tell them anything. That these are people you can go for debriefing and you can pour out and you say things are now easy. They can tell you how to start all over again. These are mostly what we call your destiny connectors. Then we have what we call colleagues or constituencies. You are in the same profession, you are in the same industry, you are friends, we went to the same school. They're just there. These are people who will support you because probably what you're trying to drive, they are also interested. So when you're driving that agenda, they will support you. But after you achieve that, everybody goes on their own way. You'll never hear from them. They'll not support you maybe in another endeavor. They are just there, but they are good to keep close. And there are those like the comrades we used to have in campus. They're just there. They cannot be trusted. They cannot support you. They'll sabotage you. So you need to have that kind of classification. So identification of the management team at an organization level, it must not just look at the hierarchical positions. It should look at the skills, the competencies. Personal competencies we are looking at, are there people who are able to work under extreme pressure? They can communicate with clarity. They are in for the organization, so they are not likely to give any contradicting information or to sabotage. Those are the people who should be in that team. The second thing, or the second important element, it is the process. Do you have the process flows? Have you come up with those, how the team will work in case it happens? Do they have procedures and the guidelines and the process that in case of a fire, this is what we can do? In terms of the environment, we are saying, do we have that conducive environment in the organization that whatever we have put in the BCP or the risk management plan or the framework, we have equipped the staff in terms of the capacity building, in terms of the training, and also the resources. One of the big setback of risk management is the organization does not prioritize allocating adequate resources for that preparation. We keep on saying we should install smoke detectors. Have we? Or we think that is a necessary cost, an unnecessary cost that can always be pushed to the next financial year. So we keep on pushing them. Then, how are the people, have they been equipped, given the authority to do what? Those are the three key elements that we should actually ensure that we incorporate. let's look at setting up a crisis management team. I think I've explained much of this. And we are saying, we'll give an example of the way the military operates, that kind of a structure. And we'll also look military, we can take at maybe the KDF or the Navy. We could look at the Navy, how they are structured. Military is one of the areas that we borrow heavily when you come to building leadership capacity, and also maybe their structures and the flow of the command. Because a crisis, it is like going to battle. Going to battle is a crisis, but you know the level of preparations we have in the military, the KDF and the Navy. So they have organized themselves in a lot of very well structures that have worked for them. And that is why we keep on borrowing the art of war, how they are organized. So this kind of structure, it is coming from that kind of background. And when you're setting up a crisis team, the issues that we should put into consideration are the following. There are like 5 of them. That every person that we are putting in the crisis management team must be assigned a role. We are talking about role clarity, so that we don't have 5 people communicating. We don't have 5 people who are running this direction. So everybody should have a separate, unique role that they understand the responsibility and the procedures. Then we are saying no person should take another person's role. You stick to your lane. The role that you have been allocated, that is the role that you are to serve. Then every person in that team should be fully equipped to handle the role in terms of the capacity building and also allocation of the resources. Then we are saying each person must be tested in that role. We've talked about drills that we normally have, the mock drives, whether we do them or not, they must be tested in a simulation kind of an environment. Then we are saying each member must be aware of the roles of the other members in that team so that they can be able to synergize, synchronize, and know who to forward, how to engage with them, but you stick to your original lane. So in terms of assembling the team, what we need to do, and some of the things that we need to look at, is to have the team synergy. People are able to work as a team. We are all different, but we bring our synergy together. So we are saying the team that we select, I gave an example of now people are working from home virtually, you are away, you've gone to Malindi, Kitui, Mombasa. In case it happens, how prepared are we if a crisis is to occur? So you're saying the team must be easy to assemble quickly, probably within an hour. So even the people that we've taken, the members should live within a reasonable distance from the likely scene of the crisis or the event. If that is why you could see people like when you go to the airport, the firefighters we can see in the picture, you'll find where in that firefighting stationary, either people work in shift, whether there's an incident, whether we have had it for the last 5 years or no. Like in the airport, how many times have we heard about the fire outbreak? Maybe once. Those people must live near the scene of where there's likely the center of a crisis. That's like the airport. So you'll find even beside the fire station, maybe there are staff quarters, because they say there are even some organization, because of the vulnerability, will have even some critical senior managers living within the organization where we have the staff quarters, all probably not so far away. It should be like when you call that team, they should be able to assemble within an hour. So those are some of the things that you need to consider when you're assembling or coming up with a team. Then the issue of duplication of roles, I've said very clearly that the crisis management members should not have overlapping roles. And then we can look at what are their key roles. When you are put in the CMT, the crisis management team, what are you expected to do? Do we have expected roles for that? First is to make key tactical, operational, and strategic decisions, to clear information for public use, that before anything is communicated to the stakeholders, to the members, to the customers, it must be sieved by that committee. And there are only people with that mandate to communicate, to update the CEO, to talk to the public, to respond to questions. And they also manage the support team that are operating. In case of a fire, we have maybe the external people from the fire companies, maybe the county government who has come with those firefighting machines, probably the rescue, all those experts, and the people who are there, it is their work to support. And we said every team member has their role, they have their own responsibility and procedures during a crisis. Do they know? That is why you can see in some of the BCP, all those procedures, the roles and what you have, someone carries some documents or some registers at home. Like a HR, you should be, if you're in that committee, even maybe when you're taking the roll call, you should be able to have the contacts of all your staff put off the office or and a copy in the office, so that if it happens when you're home, you'll not be running back to the office to find, I don't have the contacts for all your workforce. Whether it is in Excel, maintain it outside. What are some of the things that you should carry with in case of anything? So those, they should be well equipped and they should have all the equipment. This is just a typical structure of a crisis management team. This is a case from the Navy. So this also will differ from one company to another, depending with the level of the hierarchy. But there are some of the things to note, that the crisis management team leader is a separate person who is independent and off from the CEO. People may think the CEO is the crisis management leader. No, the CEO will have their distinct role, and it is advised that when a crisis or an event occurs, because he's maybe probably the voice of the organization who will be reporting, he should be off the site of the crisis. And then we also have the secretary. So secretary is someone who has the heartbeat of the organization. They have all the information, they have the contact, they know the policies and the procedure. It doesn't mean it's the secretary to the CEO, but it could be, especially when these PAs are very empowered and enabled. Then we have the people at the officers level. We could say maybe at the HOD's level, or depending with the competences, people dealing with the operations, people dealing with the media, like the PR, maybe head of the department. Someone, if it's a government institution like the Navy, who is the political liaison person. Then we'll have the one in charge of the customers or probably the suppliers, because maybe you need to call the emergencies, the ambulances, all that. Then we have the internal communication, where now the HR team falls, and also the legal, to ensure that everything that is being done in terms of the response are legally sound. And every communication that is being done, it is legally binding and sound and does not tie the organization in any way. Of course, when you come to military, you'll have the other people like the pressmen, you'll have the sailors, the political liaison team, all that. This is just an example. It may not maybe be applicable to all. So once we're doing that, we can quickly look at the roles of each and every of the people that have talked. What is the role of the CEO? This is very critical, because some organizations make mistakes and make the CEO the team leader for the crisis management team. So the CEO should be away from the office and should be in the public, so that he's the epicenter for all this is happening, and she should be well fed by the people on the ground. That's the leader of the crisis management team. Then the team leader. The team leader is actually like, when you compare to the analogy of Navy, is actually the captain of the ship. He should be able to actually mobilize all the resources and all the teams, so that they are able to give, and he gets the regular updates from them. And so that he can drive the whole, now this ship of the crisis. He's the one, and the command only comes from him. The secretary, I said, in a crisis center, this is where they should be the secretary, and they should have full knowledge of the company and also the procedures. The officers, probably the departmental heads or the people who've been put in that team, they are trusted to advise on the decision, and also probably to mobilize the resources that will be made. The operations, we are saying the operations ensure that there is business continuity. Who is that? Who is ensuring that as we are trying to cool this crisis, we are trying to deal with it, our operations of the business, probably the call center is active, people can call the calls that are coming through, we are able to respond. That is the role of the operations people, who are mostly the core business of the organization. Then the media, that is their work is to liaise with the reporters, to do press releases, the conferences, and also updating the stakeholder regularly. Then when you come to the public affairs department, of course, liaise with the pressure groups. Who are these? Are they the civil service? Are they the customers? Are they the politicians? They deal with the high pressure groups, and they dialogue with the key stakeholders, maybe call the chairman, call who have any such communications. Then customers and the suppliers, ensure there's solid and consistent relationship with them, and you are able to interact with them. Legal, I said, they ensure that whatever has been said, done, it is legally sound. Then let's look at maintaining and managing responsibilities. How do we do this? How do we maintain and manage the responsibility? We say that each member should be keenly be aware of who is handling what within the team, and they should also avoid sending mixed messages. We say slight variations maybe in the quality of the communication and what are saying is likely to attract a lot of attention from the media, from the opponents, from the rivals, and they might just capitalize on that variation. So we are saying the same message may be interpreted differently by different people. So that is why we need to have one line of command and only one person communicating so that we have a very consistent message, and also give maybe regular updates on what is happening. Then creating a strong crisis, you can see the crisis management team, it is a very critical team. It's the people who manage the crisis. It is not the system, it's not the processes. If you get it wrong on the team, then the impact is likely to escalate, and we are also likely to have an ineffective crisis management. So in terms of maintaining, getting a strong crisis team, we are saying have the right people. When I say the right people, I really emphasize this, we have the right mix. And there's an analogy of a chef that has been put there, that when a chef is preparing food, it is the quality of the ingredients and also the balance of the mix that determine the taste of the meal. So the same thing, the quality of the people in terms of the competence, the personality competences, and maybe their willingness and the passion they have for their job is what will determine the effectiveness of that team. Hi, Winnie Ciele, she's saying she can't hear me directly. Can the others hear me? Hope you're together. Hello? Banis, can you hear me? Sarah, Scholar?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
Winnie probably is from your end. Scholar, you can hear me?
Yes, I can, Rhoda. Thanks.
Yes, Winnie is complaining she can hardly hear me. Winnie, can you hear me now? Janet, welcome to the panel. She's saying she can't hear me totally. Probably she needs to check on her side if the rest can hear me, and we'll wait for her. So we are saying the right people, the quality of the team members that you select is what will determine the success or the failure of the crisis management team. And we are saying teamwork is very vital. The people who are going to form the committee, let the be people who are ready to work with each other, work within a team, because we have seen where teams are not properly constituted. People come up with their different diverse opinions. They have their different attitudes. There are people who think HR are the ones who knows better. This is our thing because we are in the risk department. They should be able to work in synergy in a team. Because when you look at a crisis, it is characterized with a lot of pressure, a lot of stress. So we need people who can be tolerant to each other. Then we also need to look at personality clashes. There are people with their chemistry, they cannot work together. And if you put those two people in one team, then the only thing that you expect to see is chaos. So those are some of the parameters that we should be considering. Then the key objective of this is to ensure that the team is strong enough to weather the storm, because it's not for faint-hearted. There should be people who are ready to pull through long hours, go under stress, work with incomplete information. Probably they are not well equipped because it's a crisis and nobody was prepared. So they should be solution-based kind of people, someone who is out there and passionate to look for a solution when there's a crisis, and not to start blaming each other or shifting responsibility, or they are not able to see their responsibility through. Then we proceed. There's a hang. Just a minute. I think my machine is also hanging. So working to the same goal. So the success of any crisis management, it is to work towards the same goal. So we are saying people should be able to work together and avoid what I could call like the sibling rivalry or the departmental silos that looks at one department feeling they are inferior, they are superior than the other. They carry more weight and more decision than the other. Our goal should not, now we should be able to put our departmental hats or our individual hats and work in one synergy for the best of the organization and the stakeholders who are being affected by this crisis. Then working together, what do you mean by working together? We are saying what happens when you constitute a crisis management team. Most likely these people had not interacted operationally in the same level, because I have pulled someone from finance, another one from research probably, and another one from procurement. Probably the research person may not have worked on a day-to-day basis with the other in terms of transactional, operational. So they are coming to a unique role and they are being brought together. So they don't have that familiarity and they are not comfortable with working with each other. And probably they don't have that trust that would have when you have been working operationally with someone, so you know their temperaments, you know what pushes them, you know what excites them. So this is a new team that is diverse with different people's opinion. So these are new interactions. So we should be able to be able to harness that so that we can work together. We should maybe establish a common training for all so that we can establish the shared values of that crisis management team and also have a common understanding. Why have we been nominated? Why have we been selected? What is the end game? What is the main essence why we are here together, even with our diverse attitudes, opinion, speciality, or their backgrounds? Then the main thing as we are doing the training, we should focus on building the trust of these people, getting to know each other, know each other's strengths and the weaknesses, and also that will also enable you in terms of placing the responsibility to these people. So we are saying, should every Tom, Dick, and Harry or any employee in an organization qualify to be in that team? What are some of the people that you should critically have in that team? Probably, let's just hear from people. Who are some of the people who should be in this crisis management team? I want to hear from you. The class is too quiet. What is happening today? Who are those people who should be in this team? And how should selection be done? Banis, could you tell us something?
Probably maybe if you have a health and safety team.
Health and safety team.
You can have someone from there. If you have someone from security, if you have an internal security employee. Yeah.
Great. Those are some of the people who should be there. Should HR be there?
Yes.
HR.
Yes. And what I'm saying, apart from the position, there are other attributes that we should be looking at when you're doing the selection of the persons. You should look at the overall value of this person to the organization. And we understand that the emotions and the stress during a crisis runs very high. And if they are uncontrollable or they cannot be managed, they are likely to negatively affect the ability to make the decision, also to solve problems. Because you can have that person in that, but anytime you are in a crisis or you're trying to come with solutions, they are the people to cast doubt in everything, and you cannot make decision, you cannot move, and you start fighting among yourselves. Those are things that should be put into consideration. The people you put in your committee should have the ability to withstand pressure, enormous pressure that comes with a crisis. Then there must be willingness to put in more hours, even hours ungodly hours, whether you're going to work there up to the midnight, you're going to spend the whole night there. These are people who are willing to go the extra mile. Then the ability to adjust from you remove your operational or your normal hat to that of crisis management. That is why I say if you're an accountant, don't bring a lot of accounting, don't come and talk to budget. Maybe the team need to be mobilized and maybe equipped in terms of the responsibility. But as a finance, because you are an accountant, you're not able to shed that tag and even enable people to go and buy small things from the petty cash. And this is a time of an emergency or a crisis, even money to pay the ambulances, or you're in the procurement. You're saying you have to go to a tender committee when you need to, because they are not in the pre-qualified. And probably those are the nearest that are going to quell the crisis. So those are some of the attributes you look for. And the person who is selecting this team should be able to know their people very well. So we looked at the team leader. What are some of the key personality traits of the team leader? We talked about their authoritativeness. They should be able to command actually the other people so that they can act. And it should be someone who is in authority and they can make the decisions at the spur of the moment. They can make the decisions on the floor before consulting even with the CEO or the chair. So they must be decisive, so that they have to make that decision that they think it will be the most effective under the circumstances. Then ability to communicate. They should be able to, who has very good communication skills, that they are able to communicate the right things, the truthful thing, and with a lot of clarity, so that they don't send any confusion across the board. They must have diplomacy. They must be able to, people who understand their team members, the temperaments and the weaknesses and the strength of the team, and also the people they are working with, or the victim, the stakeholders, and they are able to be diplomatic or maybe politically competent. Then we're also going to look at the key traits of maybe the people we saw at the operational level, who are at the officers cadre when you look at the structure. And some of the things that we look at: commitment, must be a team player. Communication skills is very key. Winnie, you're back. Hope you can hear me now. Disciplined. They must be responsive. They must be able to delegate. They must have a calming effect. They are not the people who will add fuel to fire. And they cause, when they see victims or the victim's family crying now, they are the ones who are crying with them. They should be able to give hope, encouragement, and also be able to calm the situation and tell them there is hope, we are dealing the best, we are doing whatever we can. And they should be able to be decision makers in their role, in their own roles and responsibilities that they have been allocated. What about the responsibility of the team leader of this battalion? We are talking about the captain of the ship. These are the people, their responsibility is making all the major strategic decisions, whether to close the business, whether to inform the stakeholder, whether to inform the regulator. All the strategic decisions that are to be made in that crisis event, it is the responsibility of the team leader, supported by his crisis management team. Updating the press team and the call centers. The call center, if you have a call center, should be very active, because they are able to give the information and they are able to actually assure that everything is under control. The internal communication and also the delegation, we say the departments like the HR, under the command of this leader, they should be able to do that and ensure communication to the maybe politicians in a military environment, with the president, the people, the director general should be kept updated. If it's actually a scene that is off the head office, or probably the headquarter of that institution, then they should also be able to communicate to the center of the stakeholders and the headquarters. They should be able, we say the CEO at this point is offsite with the public. He's the epicenter. The team leader or the committee should be able to update the CEO and give them the most recent information so that he can be able to update this. Then ensuring there is business continuity. The difference that I find in organization, and maybe the case study of the Navy, for Navy, when they go to battle, this is their full-time job. They were recruited to defend the country. And that is what they do from 8 to 5 or 24 hours. It is their core job, core competency. However, when it is in an organization during a crisis, the story is different. This is not our core job. It's not our core mandate. It is an emergency and occurrence that have come. So as much as this team is dealing with the crisis and event, there should be allocated someone who is ensuring there is business continuity, the people who are triggering in the office, how are they kept, what are they being told, that continuity. Maybe the systems, how are they able to come, the communication lines, how they are kept open. That must be part of the responsibility of also this team under the command of the captain. Then budget approvals. Any approvals that needs to be maybe approved at that moment, whether it is an LPO you want to give because you want this service, whether it's petty cash, it is within the mandate of that committee and the leadership to ensure that that is done. Why is it so important to manage crisis? Would we not allow just the crisis to come and pass? Then we deal with it there. Why should we be reactive to a crisis when it strikes? Is it important, or we can just sit and wait and say whatever was to be done has to be done, whatever was to go wrong will go wrong, and we sit back, then we come and do a review later. We see how much building was burnt. Why do you think it's necessary to have a crisis management? Why is it such a big topic?
Like you said, crisis things happen, but just because they happen doesn't mean that we just let them happen. We can prevent the situation from getting from bad to worse.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. You have just said the point. Because what will happen, we said issues and small issues, if not handled properly, they can escalate into a big crisis or a big emergency. So it should be critical for us that anytime when you're dealing with our crisis management plans, we have what we call the indicators or the warning signs. However, the warning signs are small. When they occur, it is good to investigate, to interrogate, and to actually enhance the mitigation measures that are happening. Because if a crisis or an issue is poorly managed, then it's likely to have more impact when it happen, and it's likely to actually become stronger as you sit for them. So even if it's the issue of the sickness, if you sit with your sickness because you fear to go to the hospital, you fear maybe what is happening to the people, or you fear what the doctor will do. Some of the things that happen, it will escalate. We gave an example of issues of cancer. Cancer starts very small. Probably you might just see the first sign for the ladies, maybe just feel a small lump, discomfort, a discharge maybe on your breast, but then you say, it will go away. It will go away. By the time it is continuing to spread, the time you feel now, I'm in total pain, I need to go to the hospital, it has moved from one stage to the other. Probably you could have been able to pick it from stage 1, stage 2, but now you go to the hospital when it is already a wound. By the time now you go to the hospital, you can see even the interventions that could have been taken, it becomes too late. And we are always left to deal maybe with the management of the pain. The same thing for us who are working in organizations. I know there are issues of culture and political upheavals that are there. If you see these signs, what are you doing about it? What is it likely to lead to? How prepared are you? What other maybe activities are you doing that could help you probably when an event comes or when this happens, then you have a plan B. That is what we call a plan B or a backup plan. So we'll look at the impact of globalization and crisis management. And the case study we have here is a case of Nike and globalization, which I may not go through the whole of it because it's big and maybe not so applicable in our case, but it's a good way to look at how Nike, however the crisis looked, how they were able to manage it very well. So the case for Nike, we all know Nike shoe. I'm sure at one point in our life, we must have worn a Nike sneaker, whether training or just a weekend wear, or probably someone in the family has a Nike. I'm sure every one of us has a Nike product in their house. be it their spouse, their children, a relative, there must be something called Nike. When I say Nike, nobody is left guessing, what do Nike make? It is a brand that is known. It is the brand that has moved to all the territories and the countries. So they are in the entire world. And for them, the world is just a global village, whether they move from one market to another, and they have been able to penetrate. So what happened? We know the Nike, the way they brand their item. We talked about the slogans. A complaint came from a Muslim community member that the image that they were using to promote their brand was close to maybe an Arab script of Allah, who is God. So they were saying Nike is competing with their religious sign, and it might send a different message. Of course, they have targeted all the markets, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Hindus, and what have you. But the Muslim community actually felt their logo, not the logo, one of the images they were using in their shoe was a script that was very close to their script, the Arab script, or the Arab script of the Allah. So wiping the storm, they introduced a new shoe, just maybe to ensure they cool this down and they're not seen as they're disrespecting the Muslim community, because that's one of their major market share. So what they did, they came up with a strategic plan of a strategic initiative of introducing another brand. We have heard about the latest, the Nike Air. That was in 1997, but it keeps on changing every year and they have different modifications. So what they were doing, they actually introduced another image that looked like a burning flame. And and they actually communicated to the Muslim, they're sorry for that. And now they started really promoting the Nike Air. That is why now you see Nike keep on removing different shoes with a name. There is the Nike Air. If you ask the young people, they'll tell you the kind of brands we have within the Nike. So the PR stunt they actually pulled for this, they actually offered to pay or maybe to construct playgrounds for Muslim communities where they actually lived, and in those markets, so they could maybe look at where the customers are, where the outlets are, and they actually, because they're normally for sports and they're for trainers, they'll come and give free shoes and maybe promote or sponsor the construction of that playground and actually bring the Muslim community closer to them. This is how they were able to do it. And actually the storm just quelled, and this is a case of how you can manage maybe a manufactured or a crisis very well. Then this is just an analysis of that case. We are saying the crisis went down as soon as it had arrived. Certainly, there was a cost in recalling thousands of the trainers where they have to recall some shoes, but it was a small cost compared to fighting an unwinning battle with such communities. Then it appeared as though there was absolutely no doubt it had even intended to offend the Muslim population. So when they were having press conferences, they actually apologized and they said they had no intention of offending the Muslim community, and they were actually willing to do something kind to them in terms of peace offerings, in terms of constructing the playground. So that's about that. This is an example of a poorly handled crisis management, which is called the BOPA. It's a case in India, which I think I'll not go through. You can go study. It is a case where a lot of people, because of the mishandling, led to a lot of fatalities. Go and Google and read that case. Then we will go to look at the framework for crisis management. I think now it will start becoming easy for us. So we are looking at five-stage framework on how to handle crisis. And I think majority of this we have mentioned in our discussion, where we're saying the first thing to do is the signal detection. Never ignore any sign. You must be able to you must have come up with indicators and the signals that when you see these signals and the warning, we should have processes and procedures and mechanisms of detecting the signals that are likely to lead to a crisis. Preparation and prevention. How prepared are we in terms of coming with our crisis management plan, selecting the team, and also putting preventive measures on how to deal with that. Number 3 is containment or damage limitation. This happens at the crisis. When actually the crisis happens, then you are able to contain the damage or the limitations. So when you're doing the crisis management, when an occurrence occurs, mainly we are trying to reduce the damage, the impact of the damage, so that it does not escalate to a higher or very expensive level. Then recoveries, it's what happened after the aftermath. What are we trying? We are trying to bring back the system together, bring back our operations, stabilize. And then finally, we have what we call the learning phase of a crisis. After all that has happened, we deployed our teams. We try to follow our procedures and plan. What are the lessons that we are learning from this, so that we prevent a further or a future occurrence of a same crisis if it's within our control, or in case if it's not within our control and it happens in future, what are some of the things that we can look differently? So this is just an explanation of what I've said. The signal detection, it says the occurrence of a crisis always begin with some form of warnings. So signal detection is a stage that advances those warnings. Becoming adept in signal detection is mindset. It's a mindset. Well, it's a skill that organization need to embrace. We should be able to detect that. Preparation, I said it is formation of the crisis team, the plans, so that can be used to attack a crisis when it occurs. And then this should be very systematic and should be done on a regular basis, on an ongoing matter. Containment, it is actual management of the crisis when it appears, it occurs, and it involves maybe the management of the stakeholders and trying to reduce or contain the crisis to the highest. Recovery, I already explained that maybe if it's a case of fire, the new facility that may be built actually may be better than what we have. So at times we normally say, we are, even at a personal level, we are wholesome over experience. If you listen to the cases of most successful leaders and entrepreneurs, they will give you a story where they went through a major crisis that was life-changing. This is what we call the crucible moments in your life, the defining moments in your life, that all hope is not gone, that when you go through a crisis, if you learn the lessons and you're able to reinvent yourself, you are more likely to even to bounce back and reinvent yourself to a higher level that you are. I'll give an example of when maybe probably you have just a modest house and it catches fire. If you are to rebuild a new house, would you rebuild the house the same way it was? Mostly there are going to be more enhancements. It's going to be better than it was before, because now you have reckoned that there can be fire. So you are going to enhance that building, that maybe it has detectors, or you have a fire extinguisher, so that you are alive that this can occur, and it has occurred to you. So you learn the lessons and pick up from there. I've seen many people who have lost their jobs, even the leaders we've had in their own companies, they go home and they struggle for about 6 months, 1 year. But what you do with that time that you are out determines with how you're going to bounce back. And you might just even bounce back 3 folds, 5 folds, or 10 folds better than you are. You might even secure more job, and you start wondering, why was I crying about losing this particular job? You get a better, more secure, better benefits, but you keep on growing yourself. Then the learning stage is, what are the lessons that you're picking? And actually the focus here when you're doing the learning is not to pass the blame games. We need to be responsible for whatever happens to us. Don't look for reason, who was against you, who caused this. I think what you should be concentrating on is owning the responsibility of what has happened to us, pick the lessons, and make a new strategy and a new move, so that that does not recur in future, or if it recurs, you'll be better prepared to do that. So when you look at the framework or the landscape, what I would call the landscape of crisis management, I look at it in 2 forms. There's what we call the internal landscape, that is looking internally. And also, and most of this maybe internal landscape are things that are within our control. There are things that we can make strategic controls and decision about, and probably we can come up with better ways to better them, and we can also to improve them, or maybe to to actually capitalize if there are issues of the strength. Just like in a person, you know what is your strength. Everybody has their own strength. Everybody is unique, the same way of an organization. Then every human being has their weaknesses, or they have their weak points. So once you understand that, you can see what plans can I make to ensure that I strengthen the strengths that I have, I capitalize them, what I have, and how can I build on my weaknesses or try to maybe limit the probability of them leading into a crisis or a trouble. Then the external landscape, we are going to look at, when you look outside there, what are the opportunities that are there waiting for me? Where are the opportunities that I can ride on with what I have internally, with my strength? What can I capitalize on, and what can I explore? Those are opportunities. Then you also need to look at that, the landscape of where you're operating, that environment. What are the possible threats? Of course, you have the threat of it happening again. We have the threats of pandemic, whether you are working, you're in an organization, or you're off. The reality of the pandemic is there because it's not internal, it's something that is external. So we will look at that, and that is, I think we have heard about all this when we've heard about the PESTEL and the SWOT analysis. So it is the same kind of an argument or premise that we are looking at. So when you look at the internal, we'll start with the internal landscape, and we'll look at it. We'll do a survey of the landscape, the internal, what is the survey, how is it looking at? Then what are the strategic planning you can do, how we can do the crisis management, and what are the organizational learning that you can do. So we are following the same thing of the stages of the framework. So when you look at the internal landscape, let's look at a case of an organization. You need to identify and acknowledge the organization's weaknesses. At times we don't like looking at this, but when you're doing the strategic plan, we do the SWOT analysis. What are our weaknesses? Is it that we have inadequate staff? Is it that we have poorly trained staff? Is it that we are struggling financially? Is it that we have maybe poor systems that maybe they are susceptible to things like cybercrime, fraud? Is it that our staff are demotivated and we are likely to have crises, or maybe the risk of downing their tools and going for strikes? So you look at all those things. So what is the appetite that we have in terms of the crisis management? Are we enthusiastic about it, or is it just something for our department? It is just an issue of ticking the box that when the auditors come, or maybe we have an audit, we can say tick, we have. We are aware of many organizations that come up with policies, plans, but they are just left to gather dust. So having a plan is one thing. Having a policy and procedure is one thing. Execution is what makes the difference. We also need to understand the organization culture. Every organization is unique and there is different. They have their own challenges. So we must be live to that, and we should talk about it. Then we should ensure that we look at the safety policies. I said, having policies is one thing, executing or them being implementable is a second thing. Then what do you look at a strategic plan when you come to internal landscape? And we are saying, form the crisis management team. Develop worst case scenario. When you're looking at it, of course, it could be medium term, the high impact, or that, but look at the worst case scenario. When you're talking about the strike, just imagine the entire workforce. Don't look at it. Some people will come, others will not come. Look at the worst case scenario that can happen. Then you need to formulate the crisis management plan. And then I talked about conducting mock disaster and also the training. And we said every team member must be tested on that. Then when you look at the crisis management, the goal here is to return the organization to its operational and functional status. Then to manage the key stakeholders. I know we have the way we profile our stakeholders. Then in terms of organization learning, I said evaluate what worked for us and what didn't work for us and what can be done. The issue here should not be blame game. It should be organizational learning, and it also should be organizational review or renewal, what you call the renewal. Even in a personal level, you want to learn a lesson. When a crisis happens, what is it that I learned from this? And how can I renew myself? That should be our main focus in terms of the learning. Then when you go and look at the external landscape, how does it look like? The same kind of analysis. Externally, we should be able to know the organization where it is operating. We don't operate in isolation. Very few organizations are specialists in not within an industry. But the degree of vulnerability of that industry, if in the IT industry, what are the industry risks and how does the environment operate? Is it vulnerable to political unrest? Maybe supply of materials, market share? Look at the vulnerability of that industry from an industry perspective. Then look at the degree of political stability. I know a lot of organizations now are preparing themselves for the campaigns and the elections that are electioneering period. How does it impact on your business? Those are political factors, technological implication. Those are things that you should. So when you're doing your strategic plan, you should be able to consider the existing government regulations and how they are likely to impact on the business. Consider the current industry standards in terms of the benchmarking. Also, you need to develop a very good working relationship with the media. Media are people who can promote an organization and they can bring an organization to its knees. So we need to have a cordial relationship that is continuous. Whether there is a crisis or not, how do you keep up with the media and what kind of collaborations do you have? At times you could even just sponsor a media breakfast session so that you place the organization in a conducive environment in terms of the press and also the quality of information you gave them. If you are defensive then and they discover that something you're telling them is not the right, they will get it from somewhere and they're likely to read it. Nowadays, we are having issues of bloggers. How do we interact with the bloggers? Are they likely to affect us in terms of their reputation and what they can be very shrewd. Then the issue of crisis management. Manage the reactions of the external stakeholders. You need to have feelers on the ground. How has it affected them? You can do this through surveys that you call the stakeholders and you just get the feedback about a crisis. Negative media coverage. What is their reaction to that has been reported negatively? What is the public saying? What are the web-based critics like the bloggers saying? They can hate of an organization. Then what are the impending government regulations in case of an occurrence? Then in terms of learning, we just reap the benefits of the industry renewal, how the industry is able to renew themselves. You are not the first one. We have looked at the case of the Swiss airline and the KQ. How, of course, the Swiss airline was in 1998, so it happened earlier. What I saw happening in KQ, they borrowed so much from the Swiss Air. Maybe the only thing they couldn't match, it is the compensation of 2 million per victim of the accident. Then you should be able to be ready for any regulations that may change and be aware of the new stakeholders' outlook. Then after the crisis, what has happened and how do they view us? I'll take a break and I want us to hear from you. Are these things that we reckon with in our organization or they're totally new? Are these things that are the things that we consider when you're doing our crisis management of the risk management profiles? Are they totally new? Winnie, welcome. I can see you're okay. Is it something that we are aware of? Or it's something totally new I'm bringing? I love to hear from my participants. Winnie, tell us something now that you're on board. Winnie? Maybe she's unable to mute. So silence means we can continue. So I'll just proceed. We have looked at now the internal. Now you understand what is internal landscape and what we look in terms of the external landscape. So we look at crisis management in both the landscape, and our first area will be the trends in the crisis management landscape. What are the trends that we have seen that are coming up? So some of the trends that we look at both internally and externally, there are those that I said probably they are within our strategic control. And there are those that we have very low or less control. So those ones that we have very less control and we have seen them coming. The first one is that, like the pandemic that is happening. We never saw it. We never thought it could bring us to that level. So that's one of it. Then we are also seeing issues of unpredictable weather patterns, natural disasters on the increase, threats of terrorism. They're still live, but those are things that we can try as much, but we have very little strategic control over it. We will make strategic decisions. We will make plans. We will have mitigations like, and the best we can do is have anti-terrorism or terrorism insurance to mitigate maybe the impact of that. Then we have also seen an increasing reliance on the internet, this both at the business and also the society level. And we have also seen increased or what we call the human-induced crisis. People are just manufacturing crises. They set each other's up. So there's an upward trend of this. Of course, we can see the issues of because of the corona and the mental issues that we are going on with in this country. We've had a lot of suicide cases. We have had a lot of issues of people killing each other, the spouses, the family, and maybe because of the pressures they are going through, both at socially and also at the work, especially for the police. Then we have also seen the issues of environmental damage by organization, and I think the civil society have come up very closely, where the organization want to actually they want to maximize on the productivity and the profit and not considering the impact of what they're doing, like in the emissions in the manufacturing industry on the environment. And we can see environmentalists are coming up with this. And we've seen even bigger crises where, like the case that happened in, is it Garden Estate, where one of the environments was eliminated. So these are crises that have impact, that maybe that led to a fatality for maybe voicing and speaking up. Then we have also seen an increase in globalization and also outsourcing of many of the activities that we have in the organization. So these are some of the trends that we have seen in the industry that are shaping. I think we've talked about the forces, the various forces we have in the external landscape. We talked about the political and legal forces. I think that's self-explanatory. The economic forces that affect an organization, that is maybe the economic trends, what is happening. Those are some of the things, maybe a lot of employment going off, such indicators, inflations, the interest rates in the banks, the exchange rates because of maybe the weakening shilling. Those are some of the forces that affect how an organization operates. And we have seen many businesses closing shop. We've seen like what has happened in the tourism industry, the hospitality industry, where the giants in the hospitality industries and the hotels are closing shops. You have seen what is happening at Intercon. Now they want to convert the whole hotel into like to a mall or stores so that they can maybe rethink their business. Radisson Blue, very new in the country, top of the star. Now they have closed shop. So you can imagine all the people who are working in those facilities, how it has affected them. The other factors that actually affect are the social forces. This will look at the things like the religious practices, customs of the people, changing demographics, and maybe the values, what the society really values. You have seen where organizations operate in a particular landscape, and there are demands from the community that for you to operate in this county, then this number of employees have to come from the community. So those are some of the social forces that affects our business. Technological forces. we look at how the scientific advancement and the way the internet has affected the way of doing business. You can see even now people have changed offices that they are working from home. So those are some of the forces that affect the operations of an organization. So again, if you look at our BCP, most of the crises that we look at are normally premise-based, probably things that can happen in an office setting. Have we stopped now to think about, now that people, there are organizations like, since Corona came, they've been working from home. What are some of the risks that are emerging from there, like the leakage of information, cybercrime, confidentiality of the information? Have we looked at that? And also, what if maybe the service providers who are providing us with this internet, there are changes in that industry? Is there a risk that we might need to maybe invest again? Or when do we retire those systems? So those are some of the things that we look at. So we're also going to look at crisis in terms of the organization life cycle, right from the first stage to where we're having small startup to where an organization has grown. So maybe just to jog our mind, when you look at the life cycle of this one, I want to hear from you. When you look at the life cycle of an organization, from a small startup to a full-fledged big organization, what are some of the challenges or the risks they're likely to be exposed? Like, let's start with a startup. What are the risks or the crises that startup organizations are likely to face? I want to hear everybody now talk. A startup, right from the start, we're looking at for a company starting up, when they are growing, when they stabilize, to when they are fully fledged and a very successful organization like Safaricom. So depending with the point of the life cycle that you are, the risks are different and the challenges are different. Let's start with a startup. What are some of the things that are likely to affect the startup? Anyone? I'm listening.
Scholar here.
Yes, Scholar.
I'm looking at the social bit, and I'm thinking about acceptance in that location with competitors and other stakeholders, even potential customers, depending on the type of business. So acceptance could be a challenge, but it can also be an opportunity.
Well said. Then maybe we go to the other extreme, a very successful organization like Safaricom, breweries. What are some of the challenges you think, or maybe an organization that is ahead of the others in terms of the asset and the market share? What are the risks and the crises they are likely to face? Wanja, are you with us? Let's hear from Wanja. She's not able to speak. Sarah, do you want to tell us something?
Sorry, I didn't get what you asked.
We are looking at the life cycle of an organization, where an organization now move from a small startup, they keep on growing, they are successful, then maybe they move to the maturity level of where they are the giants in the industry and they are very successful. So Scholar has told us the challenges of a startup they're likely to experience. So the next question is, for the most successful organization, what kind of exposures are they likely to experience? Are they under threat because they are successful? I mentioned some at the beginning. Great.
Perhaps a lack of society support.
Lack
If
of
the
society
society
support.
don't feel, if the society doesn't feel the impact of the success of that company.
That's good. Where we say they're likely to be exposed to more scrutiny by the regulators, by the society, and everybody, because they are doubting this money they have. Yes. So we look at some of them. So we look at the stage one. So the stage one, when it's a small startup or when you're starting an organization, some of the things that these organizations are struggling with, probably like they don't have specialized employees who can even form these crisis teams. So they have just generalist team who are maybe jack of all trades, they are not specialized. So what is likely to happen? They're exposed to a lot of errors because of lack of capacity, a lot of errors. These errors are likely to cause a lot of accidents, probably product defects, because they are working with very rudimental staff. So those are some of the exposures that they have. Then when you look at the next stage in an organization cycle, now you start beginning to see more empowerment to this organization. Probably they are able to recruit more people. They are able to offer some training. They are catching up of what is happening in the industry. So they are able to work maybe better than they could before. Then when they reach the success level, what happens is there's a target of various forms. You start hearing cases of extortions, frauds that they experience because they are now successful. Then when you are at the apex of your industry, some of the things that you should be worried about, it is becoming obsolete because the competition is also cutthroat, and you should be looking at how to renew yourself and differentiate yourself from the rest so that you're able to maintain that kind of hierarchy. So radical steps to boost their market share and also to ensure that the success they have, it is also retained. So let's look at strategic planning and also accessing. I don't know at what point you want us to take a break. We could take a 5 minutes break, a health break before we come back. I can say we are like halfway. Do we stop at this point? We take a 5-10 minutes break, then we resume? Or we are good to continue? Yes, Winnie had said exposure to compliance issue, like the KRA taxation, very good. Let me hear from you, whether in the chat, whether we take a 5 minutes break and come back, or do we continue and we finish early? What does silence means? We continue.
I think it means we can do either.
We can do
Maybe
either.
you need I think you need a break yourself. So
no, me, I'm okay actually. If people agree we break, that's okay. If you agree we continue, either way it's comfortable for me. So let's continue. We said either way, so let's continue. So we are going to look at strategic planning and also assessing crisis vulnerability in an organization. So when you look at the strategic planning, what do we normally do? How many people have participated in strategic planning, and how do we deal with the issues of crisis management? What are some of the parameters we look at? We look at what we call the external analysis. External analysis, so we look at the opportunities and the threats out there. We also look at internal analysis. I said we look at the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization. Then from there, we go to what we call, after we have analyzed the two landscape, then we'll proceed with the strategy formulation. After you formulate the strategy, then you can go to the strategy execution, and then you go into what you call the control and the learning. I think that is self-explanatory. That's the steps that you take. So if you are to look at each, what I think these ones we have explained. External analysis, we said what we are going to look, opportunities and threats internally. Then when you come to strategy formulation, what you're trying to come up are initiatives, or what we call the strategies on how to build and sustain the competitive edge of the organization by actually matching our strengths and our weaknesses with what is outside there in terms of the opportunities and threats, so that you can be able to come up with a working strategy that is practical and realistic. Then having the strategic plan is one thing. We always go for retreats to come up with a strategic plan. But now execution is where the rubber meets the road, and it's what determines whether we'll be prepared or not. And then in terms of the control, it is the issue of what do we learn, how do we react when an occurrence appears, and what are the lessons. And here is just a chart to show the degree of change and the degree of complexity that we are saying. The more the dynamic an environment is, the higher the risk, and the more complex the crisis in case it was to occur. Then we go to internal organization strengths and potential crisis events that are likely to happen. So we are going to look at both the strengths of an organization and also the weakness. That if an organization is enjoying this kind of a strength, then the corresponding potential crisis that they are likely to experience. So extremely fast growth companies, we have spoken about that. So we are saying loss of managerial control, because when maybe an organization expands too fast, the customers and the product lines are too huge, it may move faster than the preparedness of the managerial. So there's that loss of touch by the management. You don't have a personalized touch with the client that you have, so that becomes a risk. Then we say this condition can eventually result in defective products, because now the quality of the service is compromised. Then we look at an organization which is highly differentiated or specialized, and we can see they operate on their own, and maybe they don't borrow much from industry because they are highly differentiated or specialized. So the risk or exposure for that is that the product and service offering, because it's new and unique, it may resort to maybe service, or maybe the product defects, or maybe it may not satisfy the need of the customers. Probably they have high expectation than what you can offer. Then as a continuation of that, in an organization where we have charismatic organization leaders, I want someone to comment on this. We have had huge organization, but instead of knowing the organization, it's not the company that has reputation, it's the leader, maybe the founder that they know about. So what happens to such? Do we have such cases in Kenya that we have seen? A very huge leader in their own rights driving an organization. What happens when those leaders exit? Anyone? Do you have cases? Can we all reckon with what is happening to the Kirubi's company? He was big and mighty, but now, immediately after his demise, what has followed? The share value of the organization, the financial statements now are looking different, the debts and all that. So what happens? Such charismatic leaders have led the organization into financial ruin because they were not challenged by the board, because they were authority on their own. Then we have a long history of successful performance in terms of an organization. So this is an organization that has experienced very high performance for a long time. It is just in their blood. They are known for that. So we are saying simply being a successful company will draw criticism from many stakeholders we have talked about, Employees may feel they are not compensated enough if the company is hugely successful because they are looking at it. We are making all this money, but what are we taking as employees? The same thing. The social-minded citizens will feel the company does not share its wealth enough with them. It's not that they're not sharing enough. What you're doing is a drop in the ocean compared to their bottom line. Then we say the government will watch them closely to actually see whether they are making or they are complying with their regulatory requirements. Then finally, there is more critical review by the lawmakers, that's the politicians, because they want to be associated with this. Now they start bringing issues that you must employ people from the locality, the communication, the CSR, they must support this. If there's a community activity, the first thing they go into, then they also try to look for any fault-finding mission by the politician to ensure, especially if they're in their locality, they want to see what is not adding up, what is not being spoken. And you can hear them manufacturing a story over that so that they please their constituencies that this is what they've discovered from this organization that is purported to be very successful. So those are some of the risks. Scholar, I can see we are only 3, Scholar, Wanja, and Winnie. The rest have exited. However, we'll continue. We will just continue with the topic. Then we come now to the weaknesses. We have looked at some of the strengths that are in an organization and the potential exposures they have. What about the weaknesses? When these organizations have weaknesses, what are some of the potential exposures that they are likely? When you have poorly trained employee, what is likely to happen? More accidents, more errors, products defects, customer complaints. Those are risks that we need to be live with. When there is poor relationship with the union, what is likely to happen? Increased grievances, labor strikes, disgruntlement by the employees, and they are likely to even attract negative publicity. Then when you have maybe integrity issues in the top leadership of an organization as a weakness, so we'll have all manner of what we call the white-collar crimes. You know what white-collar crimes are? Issues of fraud, maybe vested interest. These are areas where we'll have nepotism, tribalism in the organization, poor disciplinary management because probably people are related and they are vested interest, political turmoils, toxic work environment. That is what is likely to happen. And when you have aging products, when you have aging maybe facilities and the equipment to run the organization, then we are prone to more accidents, low productivity, the cost of operations become very high. And then also we are likely to have industrial accidents that we have spoken about. We proceed with these, the same weaknesses we're going to look at. We have more examples. Sorry, my machine has hung. The other internal weaknesses that we could have in an organization is when we have understaffed or non-existence of the HR department. So what is that likely to happen? Issues of harassment at the workplace, issues of discrimination. Then we're also likely to have higher operation costs due to industrial accidents because people are poorly trained. Employees are likely to absent themselves. The issues of turnover, substance abuse, those are likely things we are likely to see. Then when we have, we always have what we call the safety audits and inspections. How true are we to ourselves when conducting this? Are you in such institutions where when you're having safety inspections and audit, like the ISO audits, every employees know every line of the procedures and the clause? They know where the first aid kit boxes, we rush to buy them, all those things are there. But the moment the auditors are there, we pack them until the next audit. So those are some of the things that we do. Or maybe when the auditors come, they just come for checklist and they may not be candid and they may not be very rigorous in their inspection. So when we have, and probably because they have been compromised, when we have haphazard safety inspections, then we are likely to attract industrial accidents because we are sweeping things under the carpet, and workplace injuries. Again, if this comes to the media, like I don't remember when there was a ISO certification of, is it Nairobi City Council? The negative publicity that is likely to come with it. When an institution have high cases of employees who are having issues of substance abuse, again, we are prone to more errors, accident, especially in the manufacturing industries, workplace injuries, and it can also lead to fatalities, and also the complaints from the customer service, and also the products that you are giving out. When there is a lack of maybe crisis management team and plan, when we just exist and we allow things to be, then what happens? Slow and a coordinated response to a crisis, negative publicity because people will be communicating haphazardly, and then there is a likelihood of issues being escalated to a level of a crisis. Then we could also look at, now that we are done with the internal landscape, where we are looking at organization strengths, organization weaknesses, and the kind of exposures that they could bring. Then we can look at external organizational opportunities and the potential that we have many opportunities externally, but then they have their own level of exposure. I'm giving an example where we have the opportunity of expand product availability. You want to move from brick and mortar, or what we call the physical branches, and then you want to actually explore or maybe go into online kind of service offering, like what the banks have done. They have moved from brick and mortar, they have gone to online, where services are able to be done online, or we can work virtually, the way organizations have moved. We have seen where organizations have even leased out their spaces because they no longer need them. People have gone to virtual working spaces. So what is likely to happen, it is, there are some people who may not be able to maybe get the products you are offering, because you'll find not everybody has internet connection, or they can afford the internet services to get your services, and they insist on going to. So there may be denial of service to some people. There are also likelihood of risk of cyber attacks by hackers. There is also a possibility of leakage of information because we are using the internet, which is highly likely uncontrolled. And we are also likely to have disgruntled employees in the workforce, because the moment we go to automation and online, then organizations are automating most of their services and maybe sending some employees on retrenchment. Then when there is expansion of company manufacturing facility to another part of the world, like where we have like the cement industries, where some of the outsourced services are done in a foreign country. So some of the risk, or maybe some of the services that you get, or raw materials, come from another country. So some of the risk associated with this is interference from the host country. We are also likely, maybe we have had issues of takeover. Safaricom's moved to this country, or this service moved to this country, and the government want to own, and they want to have a good share of that company before they give the approvals, if actually they see the organization is thriving. Then I think I've talked about outsourcing manufacturing to another company outside, maybe our host country, or that the issue of defects, low quality products, because you have no control. The control is with the other host government, and also they are likely exposures of extortion, even from the government of those host countries. So those are some of the things that we experience. What about the threats? When we have organization threats and the potential crisis. So in terms of the external threats we look at is changing demographics of surrounding neighborhood. And we say the organization may become a target of crime, such as vandalism or robbery. We have seen where very successful organization, but where they are set up probably near slums, or maybe the people, the demographic in that neighborhood, there is a lot of unemployment, especially for those who focus from recruiting from the community. So the backlash may come in forms of crimes, vandalism, and also the robbery from maybe the communities around. Issues of severe weather, what are they likely to affect? They're likely to affect issues maybe of deterioration of facilities. Let's say a building, when they are adverse and changing weather conditions, you'll find maybe the roof, maybe the tiles are coming out, the flooding of the offices, leakage of the offices. Those are some of the things. The other issue is the profitability and also the sales revenue, because probably because of the poor weather conditions, like the time for El Nino, you'll find like even the sales people, the products, maybe the product delivery is also affected. Maybe the people who are doing sales are not able to go out to the market and do the sales activation that they will do, because this is prevented by the conditions outside there. Blockage of roads. Even let's say like the pandemics, people in the transport industry have really been affected harshly, because probably there are those limitations of how many people you can carry, the issues of the border, especially the people who are dealing with the trucks, that maybe what used to take 1 week, now it's taking maybe a month because of those inspections and the testing and what have you. That has affected the business. Rumors may come from outside, but the potential crisis they're likely to lead is loss of revenue, because people can decide to boycott the products. We've seen products that have been boycotted in this country. Company publicity may be affected, and also negative coverage from the bloggers who can really ruin an organization. Then the issues of terrorism. What is the effect of terrorism attacks? Attacks on building, facilities, injuries, and also fatalities are likely to occur in cases of, we've had the incidences we have in the country where it has led to loss of life. So we are almost there. Now we will embark on forming the crisis management team and also the plans. So now that you didn't agree that we take a break, I want to request we take a 5 minutes break. I need to take a break, then we resume at what time? I want to see, what's the time now? It is 11:20. So can we come back at 11:30?
That's fine.
Yeah, so it's 11:21. We resume at after maybe 9 minutes at 11:30. Then we take 1 hour and we'll be able to complete what we have. I think we'll make it. So
Okay.
Thank you. Just feel free to grab a glass of water or a cup of tea. So welcome back. We can continue from where we had left. And hope you've been able to re-energize for the next session of about 1 hour. So we are going to focus on how we form the crisis management team and also how we develop crisis management plans. And we'll look at some of the attributes that the people in the crisis management should be able to have. So what are some of the goals of having the crisis management team? Why should we have them there? And we are summarizing into 5 main goals. And we say one of their first goal for the crisis management team, which we are calling the CMT, is to identify the crisis threats in terms of when they're making the plan, is to identify those threats, both internal and also the external, that are likely to face the organizations and come up with the mitigation measures. So in coming up with the mitigation measures, they develop what we call the crisis management plans. So the crisis management plans have actually identified all the threats, all the risks that are likely to happen and lead to a crisis, and also what are some of the strategic measures that the organization should do or should prepare with, and what are the activities that should go into those plans, the frequency, and then there is also the issue of monitoring that plan that is very critical. Then the CTM, the CMT, which is the crisis management team, it also in charge of leading the training in all the areas of the crisis management in the entire organization. So they become the TOT. Once they have been trained, they have been tested, then it is upon them to come up with the training mechanisms and the training curriculum, and also identify what we call maybe crisis champions in all the locations, and they build their capacity. And then we are supposed to lead in the post-crisis evaluation for the learning purpose of the organization. So we also need to look at the post-crisis evaluation. After all it's done, the building has been burned down, we have had an accident, and something unfortunate has occurred, and we have lost a lot of maybe money, maybe there are injuries, there are fatalities. So after all that is done, we need to now have a reflective session, which you are calling the post-crisis evaluation. So what the purpose of this is actually for the purpose of prevention in the future, that this does not recur if it's within our control. If it's not within our control, what are some of the things we'll do differently in case of a reoccurrence? Then we also are supposed to look at the weaknesses that has been noted among the team members. Were there rivalry? Were there personality differences? Were communications done well? Did we make good decisions? Were we able to reach the team at the right time? So we review the strength and the weaknesses of that committee and ensure so that we are able to say, do we maintain, if it was very well done, high chances is you will maintain the same crisis management team. Then if there were balls that were dropped, probably we could say what led to that. Were we properly facilitated and maybe make amends? Then we could also discuss maybe whether to make changes in that the crisis management team. And we evaluate the things that we did so well and the things that we didn't do well for the purpose of prosperity. Then what are some of the personal characteristics of crisis team members? Of course, I had say someone from fire and safety, someone from HR, someone from the security. But what are the personal attributes that we should be looking for people who are forming that? So the first thing they should be able to have as a characteristic is a stress tolerance. We are aware that when a crisis occurs, there are a lot of stress and emotions that comes with the crisis, emergency, fear of unknown, people, there's a lot of panic, people are unsure about what will happen after that. So actually we say someone who is in that team should be able to use maybe the stress they get as a way of triggering them into action and calming the situation and helping in terms of the crisis management. The other characteristics is ambiguity tolerance. If you are these people who said it's the absolute law, that everything must be clear for you to move, then it will be unfortunate, because in terms of a crisis management, a lot of things are unknown. A lot of information, by the time you're making a decision, it's not there. So you make first decisions to the best interest of the people and with the minimum information that you have. It will not be practical to have all the information, what caused the fire, that now instead of putting up the fire, you're asking who caused it, who is in charge, who is that? So you should be able to be tolerant to inadequate information for decision making, and also you should be solution. You should be someone who is looking forward to resolve issues. Listening skills is very critical. Why we are saying listening skills is very critical? Because there are many stakeholders. We have victims, we have service providers, we have customers, we have the public. How you pick the information from the ground will determine maybe the level of responsiveness. So you should be able to listen to all the stakeholders, listen to the victims, hear different sides of the story. That is how you'll be able to construct the scene of the crisis and maybe to gather more information. During a crisis, actually, that is how you gather information, and you are able to see, you are able to compare, and you are able to see before you construct the whole scene. It may take a lot of time before you know the actual truth and the full information of what could have occurred. So we keep on getting very gradual piecemeal information, contradicting information. So you should be a very good listener so that you can look at the body language. You can look at maybe how someone is expressing themselves so that you are able to actually see the information. The other is cooperation and collaboration, that people who are in that team must be people who enjoy working with each other and serving as a group, because this is more of a service rather than a leadership role. Communication apprehension. There must be someone who is able to express themselves clearly, they're understood, and without hesitating that whatever I say might be taken against me. That if I say this, I may be judged because of this. They should be having a communication apprehension. The other issue is verbal clarity in how they communicate. The information they communicate must be spoken with clarity and must be expressed in a way that it can be easily understood with people who are struggling with feelings, emotions, with panic, who are not calm, anxiety. And so it should be very well communicated. And especially there's someone who is in the leadership of this team. The information they give to the team should be clearly understood by everyone, not leaving more questions than answers. Then let's look at the organization strategy and crisis. So we are going to look at when we have what we have as a plan, and then a crisis comes, we look at the gaps of a crisis and what was intended in our plan. And then we'll look at some of the things that we will look at in terms of looking at the issues of control. So this is just a pictorial of what I'm saying, that the severity of the crisis and also the level of preparedness. So we have that, what we call the gap crisis, and you can see it can keep on growing depending with the severity and the complexity of the crisis. Here is a company or a corporate profile and the crisis preference, just the way we looked at the life cycle of an organization. We said organizations are different, they operate in a different environment, they are at a different life cycle, and they have their own internal strengths and their weaknesses. So these are just examples of the kind of organizations that we have. So there are those that operate in a single industry. They are just alone in their own industry. They are highly specialized. I think we had mentioned about this. So the likelihood of their crisis occurring may be minimal number of crises, and because they are the only one in the industry. Then in terms of the severity, could increase the severity because the crisis will affect only one business, and you don't have people or other businesses that you can benchmark with, or you see how they dealt with the crisis. So the net effect is they have fewer crises, but when a crisis comes, it can be very severe and can have an impact on the entire organization to an extent of going into extinction. Then when you're looking at organizations that operate in, they have multiple businesses, but in related industry. So we are looking at that level of synergy, that they are able to borrow from each other the best practices, they are likely to benchmark. So we are saying the corporate profile and the crisis prevalence depends on the degree of the relatedness of those firms and their ability to develop synergy among. So it depends with how you relate with the people in the industry, the kind of plans you have, and how proactive you are, or the kind of risk appetite that you have. Then we have those businesses that operate in multiple businesses, but in totally related and unrelated industries. So they may increase the number of crises, and the exposures are many, they are diverse. Then we are saying, because of the many and the big environment they have, the severity probably could vary from one business to another. And the net effect is that the greater the frequency of the crisis, because they are almost in many environments, so they have many frequencies of the crisis, but they are less severe because they are interacting with the industry and they keep on learning from what others are doing. Then we look at the strategic control. Of course, we said when a crisis happens, sometimes we have the strategic control, or we have control, or we can minimize the damage, or we can minimize the probability of that occurring. But others, we said, are beyond our controls. Probably they are from the natural causes, environment, terrorism. Those ones we have least control. All we can do is maybe ignore, or maybe pass the risk and the damages maybe to an insurance company. So we are going to look at when we have strategic control, what are some of the five steps that we have in coming up with the strategic control procedures. So the first one is top management. Top management are the one who will come up with a strategic plan, identify the strengths and the weaknesses, the opportunities and the threats that are outside there, and they ensure that is entrenched in the strategic plan, because it is from that the crisis management team or any risk management framework we will draw from. So it is the role of the top management, and that is where it starts from a strategic level. Then the second level is when they're looking at the opportunities and the threats, and also for something to say we are strong or weak in this, you are weak or you are strong or you have threats against who. So there's need, especially when you're doing the strategic plan, to benchmark, to do surveys. The people in the industry, in your environment, who do almost the same business, how are they faring? So when you say we are understaffed, there's a benchmark of the ratio of the staff and maybe the number of transactions that you're doing. You can look at the profitability. You can look at maybe the other strengths you have. We are better than this other organization. So the benchmarks actually give a comparative to see where you stand and also what strategies to implement. You also benchmark the mitigation measures they have come with, and maybe probably how they've handled such crises and the indicators they have and how they were able to pick. Then there is the issue of management measures to evaluate actual performance. Yes, we have very good strategic plan. We have very good crisis management plan. But when it occurs, what is the actual performance, both in qualitative and quantitative, and what was the intention? What is it that we said in the plan? Like the turnaround time for the people in the crisis team should be 1 hour. How long did it take us to get there? Were there other factors that we had not foreseen, that the team were able to communicate very well and resolve an issue? But this case, it didn't happen. So actually, when you compare those performance and you see that we performed well as per our plan, then you can leave the status quo. But when you find there are variances, we underperform from what we had anticipated, then there is call for major reviews in maybe the team and how they did. Then there is what we call the corrective action. When there is any shortfall, we said, what are the corrective action that we want to take? And that would be the final step in terms of the procedures. Then the other issues do we have in the crisis management? Do we have performance management parameters in matters crisis management? Do we ever sit back, evaluate, have clear parameters of what can tell you this is where we are, this is our performance versus what we targeted. So we have looked at some of the balance scorecard indicators and potential crises that you can use in this case. And I'll just go, I think now being in HR, we know some of the KPI we normally use. So this is ones that you can use when you're looking at the crisis management. So the first one is the number of accidents in a section or a unit. And what are they? So when you have a higher number of accidents, then there are likely to be accident and safety issues. And also probably potential employee lawsuit in terms of the occupational accidents, injuries, and also the illnesses that can come because of maybe leakage of chemicals and maybe accidents that are increased, because it is the responsibility of the employer to ensure that those are working. Issues of absenteeism by employee in a workstation, those are some of the parameters you measure. It could actually be an indicator of motivational issues, pending strike, maybe there's substance abuse, or maybe there's a problem with the supervision. We have some rogue supervisors and maybe some are abusive, and then people will fail illnesses and fail to show up for work. The number of grievances, it's how you can measure yourself. When we have a high cases of staff grievances, probably there is what we call bad supervision. Maybe there is violence in the workplace and the harassment, and maybe the morale problem is likely to be a cause. Then when you look at percentage of uninterrupted services, this is mostly on online and internet. The uptime, what is the percentage of the uptime? And if you see that this is not working, it is likely to affect maybe the customers. They're likely to have what we call the denial of service claims or the attacks. And they say, because they can't give us, let's vote them out, or let's move to maybe a rival company or their competition. And that kind of an attack is likely to affect the bottom line and the organization. Other indicators would be machine work, maybe downtime. How frequent is the machines going down? And that will affect the productivity, because if the production is not taking place because the machines are down, then what is likely to happen? They are likely to have more effort being put for the people who are operating with the machines and very low productivity. And then you can imagine it is the machine downtime that is affecting people. And then we come to performance management. And then it's likely because of that anxiety, that fatigue, it's likely to lead to accidents, which can cause even labor disputes. Percentage of defective products, potential recalls, negative publicity, customers walking out, and then negative media reports on the internet. You can say the number of negative reports that have trending on the internet. And the crisis for this, when you have negative media reports, even the bloggers come on board. They can even call for customers to boycott your products because of these, they are mistreating the employee or that. Then customer complaints. The number of customer complaints that you are receiving is an indicator that all is not well. So you can look at maybe the negative media attention that is likely to abstract from your stakeholder, and also injured customers. And then returned or defective product rates could also bring about the issue of people walking away or boycotting your products, dissatisfaction with the customer, bad publicity. Those are some of the things that are likely to happen. Then let's go to the scene of the crisis. When it happens, when a disaster hits, what actions do you take? And what do you do when it happens? When it has just happened, what kind of preparedness do we have and what can we do? So the first thing, you do the situational analysis. What is the situation like? And how do we gauge the situation? You ask yourself a lot of questions like, what information is coming from the people? What is the public saying? The people who are witnesses, what did they see? What did they witness? You try to gather that kind of information, and you also gather advice from the experts or maybe on technical issues so that you are able to do that. Then you start looking for important cues. What are some of the indicators that you can see that could have led for this? Then you look at also the historical information. Have people been complaining about this? Have we been having power fluctuation issues? Have staff been leaving their sockets on? Have the lights in the office? Who was the last person to leave the office? Who was the person who was the faster the scene. Then you identify key elements of the situation. What are the things that you can pick quickly? Because we said information will not be adequate. Then you also start maybe evaluating the degree of the crisis. Is it small? Is it medium? Is it very big? Is it likely to have a big impact, so that you are able to make decisions basing on that? Then you keep on reassessing the situation as the information keep on triggering in. We said in a crisis scene, the information will keep on coming. And as it keeps on coming, then you keep on reassessing the damage. Probably from an outside, we only saw smoke in one fire in one wing. But someone has noted something in another floor, or they have discovered the presence of people. So as information keeps on coming, you keep on reassessing the situation. Then you should be able to predict ahead what is likely to happen. Are we likely to be operationally closed? Are we able to revive? Do we have the critical documents? Were there victims? Were there injuries? How quickly are we able to come back? Then you also look at sharing of information with the relevant people. We talked about the public, the stakeholders, the press, and also maybe the other affiliates of the company. Then we're going to look at decision making during a crisis. How do we make decisions in a crisis? And how do you start? Already we said we have a plan, we have a team. How do we come to the activation of the whole flow, and how things should be able to move from one step to another? So we are going to look in a total about 7 steps on how you should be able to move. And the first steps we say is you alert and assemble your team. This time already you have a plan, you have the team, so you know the team members that you have, and you know their key roles, where they have been trained, they have been tested, and they have also been issued with the policies and procedure in case of an occurrence on how to activate them. So as soon as a crisis is detected, the team should be assembled. And because we said some of the things that we should consider is like some of the critical members should be able to live not so far from the center of a likely crisis. So in this case, we give ourselves like maximum of an hour. They should have been called, contacted, and assembled, and they're already on the move. Then the number 2 is to collect all the relevant information. I think I've talked about you asking yourself what happened, who was involved, where did it happen, what is the current status, where do we start? That is collecting all the relevant information you can take on the ground, and from the victim, from the people, through listening and talking to them. Then the third stage would be to assign tasks and continue with the fact finding. So the moment the team is there, we have analyzed the situation, this is the group. Then you already know your roles and responsibility. You now assign yourself the task. Rather, you need to run and call. You need to move. You need to call the fire services. You need to call the police. You need to notify this. You need to communicate to the staff. You need to take the victims to the hospital. You need to call an ambulance. So you allocate each other tasks according to the responsibility. Then you're also supposed to develop solution alternatives. At that moment in a crisis, you have to make decisions. What are the solution alternatives that you have? Look at the pros and for what will serve us under the circumstances and as quickly as possible. Then you pick the best alternative that the team will agree, and you move with it. Then the next thing is to implement chosen operation solution that has a. Once you have agreed, now that alternative solution, go ahead and implement. Because if you make decisions that are not implementable, then there are challenges. Then ensure before the media can pick the information from the eyewitnesses, your rivals who have come to witness your downfall, ensure you are the one who is proactively engaging with the media, and ensure you arrange for press conferences so that they are able to prepare, you're able to review the current situation so that you give the accurate data that they may not get from the ground. So you should be proactive in terms of communicating to the story. Otherwise, if you don't do this, I told you, they can always get this information, but how correctly and how it will be picked will affect the public opinion and also the people. People at times believe the media. Then, because they're also giving it earlier than you can give. Then review what happened, pick the learning lessons, and go on. Then we are going to look at the crisis management team monitoring. And we are saying how we monitor the crisis management of or the performance of the work team will depend with several things. The first is the unfolding scenarios. What is unfolding as we progress with the crisis management? Maybe it could start as something small, but then a lot of, you can remember like the case of Westgate, a terrorism attack, then there were tenants. So as the information keep on unfolding, it also guides how we evaluate and we monitor the progress of how well we are doing. Then the other thing that will also determine how we'll progress is available resources and how long it will take to deploy them. Are we well equipped? Do we have the resources? And when we need them, how fast are they likely to be enforced? You can imagine a fire extinguisher or the fire services which are arriving 3 hours down the line. Will it be useful to anybody? They will not. So how fast we are able to get this information in time, the resources will determine how fast we'll progress. Then how long will it take to execute a decision or a solution? That as a team, we have come up with the best option and the best solution, but then you find there is so much bureaucracy in terms of the decision making that you have to call the CEO, you have to call the chairman, he's not picking his ones. So are we able to move very fast with that? So how long it will take to execute those decisions, because maybe of the mobilization of the resources, the approvals determine the success of how we are faring on. And then who and what are the victims of the crisis? You should be able to know who are the victims, who are affected, what is the impact, what is the implications, what is the regulatory provisions about that? Are we likely to have lawsuits? Are we having fatalities and injuries? Our maybe servers down and we are not able to pick our operations. It is good to look at that. Then damage containment. What is damage containment? The damage is already starting. We are already in a crisis. Why do you think we need to contain the damage? Damage containment, it's actually what we call we are trying to reduce the effect of what has happened. Maybe from spreading and affecting more people, maybe from escalating to bigger damages than we thought, or to more people. That's what we call damage control or damage containment. And damage containment actually emphasizes the crisis management, and will focus on these 3 goals that we have listed there. The first one is gaining complete control of the crisis. You feel you want to get the control and you're in charge. You want to contain what is happening. Then the next one is conducting frequent damage assessment. As we progress with time, just keep on assessing how much it is escalating. And finally, our focus is to restore the normal operations of the organization so that the business can continue running. Good. The other issue we have in crisis management, we have 2 approaches. We have what we call the proactive approaches or initiatives, and we have the reactive in crisis management. I want someone to comment about proactive and reactive initiative, and which one do you think we should go? Are they both necessary, or we need to focus on one? Let me hear. Proactiveness and reactiveness in any situation. Are they both applicable, or we should be more proactive than reactive? Or how do we manage with both? The words means just as they are, proactive and reactive. Winnie, are you able to unmute? Mm-hmm. Yes, Wanja.
I think they are both applicable depending on the situation. For proactive is to protect or to plan fast beforehand, before it happens. And then for the reactive is after it has happened, aftermath, we deal with it.
Great. You have said it correctly. So we employ both initiative. When it comes to planning, mitigating measures, preventive measures, we apply what is proactive. So we try to be as proactive as possible. But then when an occurrence occurs, a crisis occurs, a disaster hits, then we have to act at that moment. So they are both applicable. And we will look at both of them and how they have been applied in crisis management. So proactive, we are saying it seeks to determine internal weaknesses and also the strengths of an organization, and also to scan the environmental threats so that we can plan on how to actually reduce their impact on the business and maybe the possibility of a crisis. It also seeks to formulate the crisis management team and have the crisis management plan so that we prevent and we mitigate anything that could happen in that. Then when you come to reactive, as she has said, it seeks to respond to crisis events that occurs. We want to contain the damage, we want to restore the operations, and we want to pick the lessons that can be learned in the course of doing business. And those applies both to internal and also the external landscape. So again, the evaluation and the benchmark, we talked about what went well. I think we have said, what is it that we did so well? It's what we call in our management, the post-mortem evaluation, that after every event, whether it is a crisis or a corporate event, it is always good for that steering committee or the committee that has been appointed to go back and do a post-mortem of what transpired, what are the things that they did so well, what are the areas of improvement, and maybe how can we prevent those occurrences in future if actually they are preventable. So those are some of the things we look at, and maybe trying to understand what went right or what went wrong. Some of the parameters you may look at in an organization would be how the crisis affected the stakeholders. Maybe are your customers, who are the people whom you serve, the public. How is the behavior of the people that you serve, and what are their opinion, even from public opinion? So those are that can tell you how well we did and how it is perceived from outside. The other issue, especially for the listed company, it will be how are your sales? The sales figures, are they declining? Are they the same? Have they increased? What is the behavior of your share price in the capital market? Have they been affected? Sometimes you see a drastic drop, maybe some investors withdrawing, or that. Then we also need to look at which crisis response strategies and tactics were effective and which one were not. So those are some of the things you look at, and they'll act as your guiding post. Then we're going to look at some of the major tools that you can be used to obtain information for you to be able to know what is the public opinion, how were we felt from a public or external perspective. Apart from those indicators, how do we collect that information to ascertain, or do we just wait for someone and say, people are saying this and this? How can we accurately deploy some of the tools in the organization to actually gather this information and get candid feedback that is reliable for decision making? So the first thing you can look at is the sales and the profit tracking. Just look at the sales and the profits, that the performance of that organization before the crisis, probably 6 months before, and also look at the period after. Then you'll be able to see the fluctuation and changes if there are any. The other tool that you can employ is organizing for stakeholders forums. Stakeholders forum is where you call all your stakeholders, especially the way you have profiled them, and then seek feedback. Have an Q&A open session where you ask questions that are related to that event, get the feedback and get their opinion, and then you update them. So you call that forum in terms of updating them on what has happened and then you give them maybe probably what the organization expects of them going forth to maybe reduce the impact. We want you to reach to the other customers, maybe the constituents, that kind of thing, so that they can also help you as you recover. Focus group for stakeholders, where you call a particular stakeholders. If it's directors, call them, have a focus group, review, have feedback, and let's hear what they have to say. Probably the way you profile them, take that cluster and have a small focus group so that you can get that feedback. If it's employees, maybe you could call the senior management. You could call maybe the union. You could call maybe the employees, maybe one per department or a particular department, to actually just say how they were affected. The other tool would be surveys to the public, issuing public surveys and participation so that you get the feedback and determine, that will be able to determine the attitude of the people and the opinion of the people on how we handled that crisis. The other issue will be documenting the crisis event. So do we have tools, procedures, and processes of documenting the whole of that occurrence, right from the onset, in terms of the plan, what happens, what was applied, what initiatives were taken, what lessons did we learn? All that is documented in a document that can always be used for future references. And during that, it can give a lot of information. The other issue would be to document the strategies that worked very well and also those that didn't work very well. And the ones that didn't work, let's do an investigative study to see why they were not effective. Good. Then we come to communication. We said for any crisis, communication is very critical. How we communicate, when we communicate, determines what goes out and the opinion and the behavior. Again, if we promptly communicate, we may be able to avert bigger damages and more crises. How we communicate and we deal with our issues is also likely to affect. So in terms of the communication, we are going to look at the various stakeholders, especially the media, and probably how we can apply these, some of the do's and the don'ts and the best practices in terms of maybe communication. So here we recommend use of various communication strategies. They are diverse, and we will look at some of them. So we will look at probably the strategy that can be applied or is normally applied by the organization or the public, and then how are they applicable? So we look at the application. So the first communication strategy would be you deny. The organization comes out and they're defensive and they deny all the claims and allegations. When do we apply this? We can apply this if the crisis that we're talking about, it's not a crisis, it's just rumors. Probably some of the people in the competition, or maybe people who don't like the progress or are not committed to the organization, they start to mill rumors about the organization. So at this point, it is good for the organization to come forward and actually deny these rumors and also give the communication and the position on the ground. Then it is also used when organizations face an accusation or challenge that has no merit. It's baseless. It is someone maybe probably who is just aggrieved. And then we are saying this cannot be used together with where we are trying to diminish the impact of that crisis, or we are trying to rebuild from a crisis. So it is, if it's not true, it's rumors, you deny. And that is an express communication kind of a strategy. The other one is diminishing. Diminishing is where, like the case of Nike, something has come up, but you want to reduce to reduce its impact or its spread. So your intention is just to diminish it. So we are saying this happens in cases of like accidents where the company has a clean record and there are no previous crisis history, and maybe you divert the attention to something else, like the Swiss Air. What now they divided? Yes, an accident has happened, but they diverted all the attention to maybe to the families of the victim, to their compensation, how they are sorry, press conferences. That's how they did this to diminish the effect and the negative publicity that could have been. It's out of their reckless or maybe repair of the aircraft that's not had happened. Then we are saying this can also be used when you want to rebuild, when you want to diminish this, but then you want to rebuild, like what we saw in the case for Nike. Then the other issue will be when the organization is subject to victim crisis, like the plane crash. Of course, there were victim crises, there are outcry that will come from the victim. So when that is happening, you may concentrate on getting the medical for the victims, best injury, rushing them to hospital, care for the family, information desk. That is how you deal with all these things. And this is very good, especially when we don't have prior bad reputation about the organization. What is the rebuilding communication strategy that you can pick? This is applicable when the crisis is preventable. It is within our strategic control, and probably it involves an accident, and the organization has a clean record in the past. And this can also be used together, as I said, with a diminishing strategy. Then the last one is where you want to strengthen or to supplement this other strategy, so you have a combination of both. About news conferences, press conferences when we have a crisis. I think this is a very clear picture we have seen. When there is a crisis where the media, you organize a room, whether a boardroom, where you keep on giving regular updates on what is happening, maybe after every hour. And we will give some of the do's and the don'ts when you're doing the press conferences, and maybe the best approach to do that. So the first thing we say about the new conferences, which I think most of our organizations, we don't do very well, it is continuous practice, rehearse. If you are the CEO, if you are the spokesman of an organization, before you go to the media, ensure you're well prepared, practice your speech, rehearse so that you are very congruent with what you are saying. You don't end up, because of maybe lack of information, contradicting yourself. And ensure by the time you go them, you have the up-to-date information. And that is why the briefing of the person who is the spokesman from the team is very critical. Again, the other issue is there is need to develop rapport with the media. This is something that we really neglect until we are hit with a bad publicity. Do we have our PR department, our communications department that keep in tab with the media? That even when you have good news, they can be able to give that. When something negative is, are you able to get that information before it even goes to the print or the other media or the TV? So it is good to keep the media very close, build rapport, know people, understand each other. If you're able to sponsor like breakfast press conferences, call them for a media breakfast meeting, just to discuss issues without coverage. This is a very good strategy of having a good rapport with the media. Don't involve yourselves with the fight with the media, because you can never win. It will escalate to the blogs. Then when you are going for a press release, if there are questions, maybe the spokesman is the CEO or probably the chairman. There are many questions that are likely to arise from the public or from the media because they have very intriguing questions. Ensure the questions that need to be addressed by technical experts are addressed by technical experts. So probably if it's a press conference like the one we are seeing seated, have the people with the technical, the operations people around you, so that if there is a question that comes about the manufacturing, about the ICT, then that ICT person can be able to respond, so that they respond to the questions accurately and also professionally, so that you don't end up being misquoted. Then you should be able to have a sense of calm. You should not panic. You should not be anxious. You should be calm and collected, how we interact with the media. And always restrain yourself. We have seen some people being interviewed, and because of the provocative questions that the journalist will ask, they end up losing their tempers, and they become angry. They might even decide they'll not answer, like what we could see in the case of Trump. So it's always good to be calm, composed, and just don't take up fight with them. Don't get angry, because they'll ask you very provocative questions. You should be ready for that. And you should always be prepared the kind of questions that the media will ask. So you should be preparing your speech, and also you should also be proactively thinking about what are some of the questions that could be asked. And especially if you are the spokesperson, you should be able to be watching such briefs, so that, especially when a crisis appears or occurs in another organization, so that you learn through experience and practice. The other thing, never misguide the media. Always tell them the truth, nothing but the truth. If actually they come to realize that the information you are giving them, it's not true and it's misleading, and they come across some more information that may appear more accurate, they can hit you hard. And finally, when you're calling the media, give them sufficient time. Give them about 3-4 hours before the press conference. So it is good to send a communication and invite them at a particular time. And also the issue of the timing, you'll see when we are doing these media briefs, mostly they will come late morning or early afternoon. So it gives you time as the spokesperson to prepare of what to tell them, to prepare and have the latest information and update as it's coming at the point of the crisis. It will also give the media houses, it will calm them because they know you have accorded them the opportunity, and it will also give them ample time to go and prepare so that maybe the airing could be done in the evening. So maybe mid-morning or very early afternoon is the most appropriate time because they are not in the hurry and they'll have prepared. Then organization learning. We keep on saying organization learning, that after every crisis, what is the learning lessons? We say there is no good or bad crisis, but there is always a silver lining. When it has all occurred, we have no control. We have tried to put our mitigation measures. We have done what we planned for, but it still happened. Then we need to sit back and do a review of what happened and what we learned. So what are some of the activities that happen in the organization learning after a crisis? So we will, and we also look at the importance of that. So in this, we have various levels of learning outcome after a crisis. It could be rudimental, it could be a successful learning. So we, at times, some organization, even after crisis, they fail to learn anything. Others just learn something little, partially. But there are those institutions or individuals who they actually make lemonade out of the lemons. That out of the crisis, their focus is to renew, to go to new heights. So let's look at the degrees of learning that we'll have and the various impacts and the issues that will come. So when the failure outcome is where there's no learning that occurs. Business continues as usual. They say, if it was to occur, it will occur. But what is somewhere in the middle? Learning occur, but the application are very sporadic and partially applied. Probably this department may apply, the other one may not. Or we say, anyhow, they are very mild about it. They are lukewarm about it. Yeah, there's some, or you could learn lesson and not apply. The other one, which is successful learning, is where the learning actually occur in the entire organization, regardless of who did well, who didn't do well. So they'll come up with issues of new policies, procedures, review, strategic plan, and all that, and also the kind of performance monitoring tools they'll come up with. So that is what it means. What about the impact, future impact of the organization, where there's failure to learn? Then the organization could continue to make the same mistakes, and similar crises will just recur and find them where they were left, or it could be even worse. When we are lukewarm, then some areas of the organization may change because people are proactive, but others will still lack them, and the crisis can still strike hard. Where organizations have learned, the organization changes its policies, procedures, learning is applied for future crisis events, and they could be eliminated. Then what about the application of the strategy itself? In terms of the strategy, we say that the crisis management just remains reactive. There is no proactiveness in terms of that. Then when it's just lukewarm, reactive, but willing to learn, but not yet there. Then when it is successful, we see a lot of proactiveness, willing to learn, and also learning, and it's taken to, and the application of what we learn is taken to the next level. Great. What are some of the things we can learn from a crisis? What are the lessons that we can take home? So when you're looking at internal, we look at the internal landscape. Internally, what is it that we can learn about management of a crisis after the crisis? That's post-crisis. So one of the things that we can learn internally, when you're looking at our strengths, our weaknesses, our plans, our implementation, is what are the emerging vulnerabilities. I said very few people could foresee Corona coming. Then you are able to scan again the environment and say, when we made our plan, these were the exposures. But now after this, maybe what has hit us, it was unexpected. So you start thinking, if this was to happen over the weekend, over long holidays like Christmas, when everybody is home, when you are working virtually, what are the risk exposures and vulnerability that are coming on board? Then you also look at new methods of detection. Probably it was a fire. Can we enhance our security measures? Can we install maybe the CCTV if you don't have? Can we actually do what? Can we allocate someone who will be switching all the lights and inspecting the office before they leave? Again, we can look at issues like terrorism. Can we enhance the security checks at the entrance? Probably if you have a facility like that have, or property management that have different tenants, can we have more rigorous maybe procedures of vetting our visitors and also maybe our tenants? Then you also review the crisis management team. How well did they perform? What were the challenges? What is it that they did well? You evaluate. If there is need for changes, then you make changes in that crisis management team. If there were capacity issues, then you can build their capacity in terms of training. If there were resources issues, then you can allocate probably more budget and justify, and you allocate more. Then what are some of the new maybe simulation that can be used? Yes, we'll be doing fire drills, but where the fire or the disaster struck is totally the opposite from what we train on. So what other maybe drills should we? Did we have people who could do the first aid? Did the first aiders act on time? Were they able to actually do what they're supposed to do, or they're just there in terms of policy and procedures in our document? But when presented with that, you could find some of them just broke down like the victims. So what do we do to that? Then we should be able to look at what were some of the missed warnings, the signals. Were there signs that we took for granted, we didn't recognize, we didn't take seriously? Because after a crisis, you look, what are the events that happened just before the crisis? And we might see, yeah, the fire alarm was going on since morning, and we actually downplayed it. Then eventually something happens. Then what are some of the improvements we can do in terms of the communication networks? Again, what to learn and how do we learn? Yes, we want to learn, but how do we learn? Do we conduct a training? Do we call for an experienced consultant and do an in-house training? Do we need to visit other organizations for benchmark to see, probably when you're coming with those drills, that we already know KQ, can we meet the leader of that and the committee, and they can share experiences of what could have done. Then used debriefing meetings like we talked. After it has happened, have meetings with the focus groups, the stakeholders, just to learn from them and tell them, what do you think the committee could have done better? What are the areas of improvement? Those are the issues. And also if there are victims that were there, you keep in touch with them and you keep on maybe updating them on the way or things are going. Then you have to look for ways of documenting the crisis. I said both in paper and electronically, so that it becomes a learning lesson and should be shared and should be a document of study by the people who will continue being the crisis management team. And finally, the feedback system that we normally have, how do we manage them? Do we have a system anyway for managing the feedback? How is it managed? How is it evaluated? How is it monitored? How do we respond to maybe the queries and the issues that come? That is from an internal perspective. Externally, are there lessons to be learned? Yet external is out of our control? Yes, there are lessons to be learned. And some of the lessons we have to learn what are the new threats that we didn't know, the climatical changes, the technological advancement, the regulatory, the data protection legislations that are coming on board. How are they likely to affect us? So you keep yourself updated to what is changing in the industry and the environment, and then you come up with the new potential crisis and how to deal with them. Then external trainings. Do we need to have training opportunity? I think I've overemphasized that, where you can look for a consultant who is an expert. You can go to other institutions for learning and also benchmarking. It's also a way of training opportunities that you have. Then better partnership with the industry partners. How much support did you get from them? How have they dealt with this? So do we need to collaborate more with our partners and maybe the stakeholders in the industry, because we have known a crisis can strike? Then also, do we need to enhance maybe our relationship or our interaction with the government agencies, the media houses, the suppliers? How well do they turn for us during the time of crisis? They start asking for debts. What is the relationship that we have with these people? Then we can also learn from the best practices. Learning from the best practices that are outside the organization are ways of learning. And finally, I think we've come to the end of our presentation. And because of time, I mean, you could just look at, it's a very simple exercise that just show you, it's telling you to take a project or one of the activities in your organization and see how it can be rated, whether it has a very high likelihood of happening or not. It's probably higher or not, average, unlikely. Then you keep on analyzing and you can see how well, in terms of the indicators we had put, that the organization is prepared for a crisis. It will also give you a scorecard that these notes you'll get from the learning management system of the ICHRP, where you'll also get your certificates for your 2 CPD points, and also you'll also get the recordings for this meeting. So you'll get the presentations there. So it will also show you in your scorecard, if an organization scores between this and this, how are you ranking in terms of your preparedness and effectiveness in terms of crisis management. Maybe just to close as a summary, we say there are things that we have picked and I think we have learned, but maybe 5 of them that you must remember is you can always look from the many indicators. There are many indicators that you can detect that can actually tell you the likelihood and the vulnerability of an organization in terms of crisis. Then risk assessment, we said it should be given the due attention that it deserves. It should be an elaborate exercise that should be able to be financed and invested by an organization, done with a lot of rigor, because how well we scan the environment, we do both internal and external risk analysis, will determine how well prepared and how well we can be able to deal with a crisis. This is where we come up with the crisis management team. You don't want to be in an organization without a crisis management team, and we'll be firefighting. You don't want to be in an organization where there is no crisis management plan and it is not even recognized in the strategic plan. So this is where the risk assessment comes. Then something else not to forget, that things can go badly wrong or so wrong, mainly because we had warnings that we ignored, or we failed to actually even recognize some of the signs that were given before an occurrence happened. Then when you come to the crisis management team, we acknowledge the team is made up of people. What is the team mix? What are the competencies? What are their diversity? How can they work as a team? So there is need, we say people are the most valuable asset, and we should be able to come up with a team that is very objective, rational, and well constituted in terms of who can join and who will not and what they are. Look at even the personal characteristics that we looked at. And then second last, we say we say each member of the crisis must have very clear roles, that is separate role. And we said we should avoid duplication of roles so that everybody stick to their lane. And that brings me to the end of the long presentation. So you'll get the presentation. It's quite huge. It's about 96 slides, and covering that in 4 hours. I think it has been an experience which we have delivered. So now I'll invite comments, questions, answers, clarifications before we officially close the session. You can do it on the chat. you can unmute, just unmute. Let me hear your comments. How has it been? Was it intensive? Have we learned? Have it met our expectations? Just to hear.
Yes, Bernice here.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that insightful training. And yes, for me, it has met what I was looking at and looking for. And yeah, thank you.
It's quite huge, but I know we'll get the notes, so you can always internalize. Yeah, good.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
And we wish you well, Bernice, as you look for a new job, a new opportunity. This happens. It is a crisis at this point, but you can look at the silver lining. Try to see what you can engage, because with all the years experience you have, you are a very resourceful person. So as you're waiting, what else can you do?
Yes. I actually attended your HR consulting training as well.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Yeah, great. Thank you. Scholar, you're still with us?
Yes, I'm here. I actually typed my comments, and thank you it's okay. Thank you very much for the delivery. I think it was very informative, but also very intense. Obviously, in that sitting, I might not have got everything, but at least I have an appetite to go and read again and understand. So thank you. Within that kind of a short time, you've done well, Rhoda. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, time was, it was intensive. Time was not, probably that's why we didn't interact well today, but we look for more sessions and also interact with the notes. Wanja, we've not heard from you. Oh, we had. Yeah, we had heard from you. Please, let's have closing remarks.
Thank you. The session was informative and timely, especially in this week of COVID-19. I think right now, what I can say is that I have now new ways or new ways of dealing with the crisis in case it happens. Thank you so much. Looking for yet another session.
Winnie, are you able to unmute? I think Winnie has been struggling with unmuting, but I know she's with us. So what I like about, especially when you challenge yourself with something that is not probably along your line, like crisis management, as HR, what I normally say, this is also another opportunity for us to show up at the workplace. I know with crisis management, HR has really been involved and we have shown ourselves. So when you have this knowledge, when the other people are still remaining a specialist in their own field, you have a value add. Over and above your operational issues that you're doing, you can show up at your workplace or wherever and say, I know one thing about crisis management. Then when the risk and maybe the audit committee, whichever department, internal controls that deals with this in your organization, if you are put in those task forces, the focus group, or maybe those committees, at least you can talk with authority and you tell them, this seems not to be maybe meeting. We've not done these mock drives. We've not done this. Have we tested this? Then you'll be able to add value to the contribution of that. So thank you very much. From me, I know it's a weekend and I don't want to keep you for long. It's already past midday and we have other engagements we want to do, because weekend is a very crucial time. And that is what I say, for the few professionals who sacrifice their Saturday when they are supposed to be out there shopping and meeting with the relatives and going for wedding, for personal development, it is a good investment. It will pay. We keep on learning. I say learning, it's an everyday affair. You cannot know enough. It is good to keep on learning this. I know next Saturday we'll have another session, which probably the DENS have already communicated for the session that is coming. So for those, it will also have 2 CPD points. So you can get ready. I know that the training will be conducted next week on Saturday. Probably will be with Catherine, and I wish you all the best. So until probably next month, for me, we are now through with the August series, but we have one more series which is coming up on Saturday. So I wish you well, and wish you a good weekend. It was nice interacting with you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhoda. Nice meeting you, colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, nice meeting you too, and nice weekend.